The training regimen at Dragon Academy is way more brutal than you'd imagine. Even the youngest students are put through merciless drills. Right now, they're all holding heavy weights while practicing breathing techniques, trying to last as long as they can. Most of them are struggling badly. Only a handful manage to hang on, but one boy clearly stands out. He isn't just holding the same weights as the others, he has massive boulders stacked on top of them. Even the instructor is stunned by his raw strength and endurance. What they don't realize is that this kid is actually the reincarnation of Earth's strongest man, the very founder of the Dragon family. Even he eventually passed away when his time came, but that wasn't the end. He opens his eyes in a new body, the body of an infant. The fact that he's a baby shocks him. There are other babies present too, and from his observations, he deduces that he must have been reborn into the Dragon line once again, as they are all housed in a separate facility. Just then, Dragon maids show up pushing a cart loaded with a mysterious red fluid. Among them is a goblin whose presence immediately triggers the hero's suspicion. The maids first forcefully feed the goblin that liquid, causing the creature astronomical pain before it explodes into a bloody mess. This test proves that the concentration of magic in the liquid is high enough, a perfect sweet spot. The maids promptly start feeding that diluted red liquid to everyone. The hero can't quite grasp the situation, but as his turn arrives, he realizes the liquid isn't milk, but something overflowing with terrifying magical power. This is ancient dragon blood, and they are making them drink it. Instinctively, he feels he needs to spit it out since he already swallowed a bit. As the other babies are doing, he needs to do the same and spit the liquid out before he explodes. But he rethinks his choice and decides to absorb all this magic power instead. This will help him reach the true peak of martial arts. He might even surprise his past self. With that in mind, he drinks all the liquid, claiming they never should have underestimated Gilfus Dragon. He absorbs all of the ancient dragon's true source power to reach the apex of martial arts, a height he could never attain in his previous life. The maids are surprised that he absorbs the liquid so calmly, but they choose to ignore it since the result works in their favor. The other babies seem to survive as well, but this instance is nothing to take lightly. As expected of an infant's body, overwhelming sleepiness suddenly hits him. Fast forward 7 years, and the child once known as Gilfus is now renamed Zyke Dragon. He trains relentlessly, and he can clearly feel how magnificent his body has become. This is all thanks to the blood of the ancient dragons flowing within him. The source of this power exists in all living beings, but the ancient dragon blood that Zyke and the other babies consumed contains vast quantities of two distinct source powers. Those who absorb even a small amount of this liquid gain bodies far superior to ordinary humans. Unfortunately, or rather fortunately, the hero, who is guided by the divine dragon's source power he had absorbed in his previous life, took in every drop of that ancient dragon's unique power. He undergoes a transformation so astonishing that even he finds it hard to believe. By all logic, he should have reached at least 4 stars by now. A star is a truly compressed source of power formed when one imagines their body as a universe and allows a star to float within it. However, each additional star becomes increasingly difficult to form, and the more stars one possesses, the greater their strength. The hero has reached the unmatched rank of 10 stars, the only one in the world to ever do so. It has been 7 years since he was reborn. His mother has already passed away, and his father never showed up. Being reborn thousands of years into the future shocks him, but what irks him more is the reality of this era. A millennium later, the world has become a place where the strong devour the weak. The clearest example of this is the dragon's trial ritual. Only the babies who survive are allowed to train as warriors of the Dragon family. Throughout these years, not a single obstacle has been able to stand in the hero's way. Zyke tries to investigate the combat training in his family, but the maids have nothing to say, more like they aren't allowed to talk. The maid he interacts with is a 3-star fighter, which is enough for basic combat training. He feels exhausted having this bare interaction even after living together for 7 years. Later, he heads toward the forest and eats poisonous herbs as a part of his training. He first senses someone's presence and notices an angry boar surrounded by a black mist, which didn't exist 1,000 years ago. Soon enough, they get into a fight and he crushes the boar with a devastating punch. The damage seems surprising from someone at his level, 1 star, but the quality of a star is what really matters. The hero takes his leave with the boar and decides to go on a journey. Unbeknownst to him, a strange man has been hiding nearby. He witnesses the fight and immediately realizes that Zyke is no ordinary child. Not only does Zyke defeat the boar with ease, but he also notices the man's presence. However, as the child of the family head, Zyke is not permitted to leave freely and remains under constant surveillance. The stranger grows interested in him. Later, the hero overhears a group of warriors discussing something. He enters the room asking for their business, to which they explain that they have come to retrieve Zyke because he needs to take an examination. This makes the hero furious. He thought he was being returned to the main family, but they take him to the dragon's nest for the examination. This is the Dragon family's own exclusive educational institution that they established during that millennium. Everyone born into this family has to enroll in this academy at the age of 7, and today is the day of the entrance exam. Yet the hero hasn't been taught a single thing. The hero holds his head, knowing the test is mandatory. Zyke appears visibly exhausted, prompting a child named Lajik from Old Scale Village to interrupt and speak to him. Zyke finds Lajik timid at first, but quickly realizes the boy possesses courage beneath his nervous exterior. Zyke introduces himself in return. As the hero explains his worry regarding the exam since he doesn't know the content, Lajik is thrown off. Before the conversation can continue, Retin from Old Scale Village calls out to Lajik and begins bullying him. He shouts mockingly, telling Lajik that he should have stayed at home because someone like him could never enter the academy since his father was nothing more than a mock dragon. The L-Dragon family follows a rigid hierarchy. Lesser dragons are classified as rookies, young dragons are known as common soldiers, adult dragons belong to the captain class, and elder dragons occupy the highest ranks as elders or executives. At the very bottom are the mock dragons, those who failed to enter the dragon's nest or could not graduate. These individuals are labeled as imitations, but Lajik is desperate to shed the mock dragon label from his family. The hero speaks in favor of his friend, saying he at least deserves a chance to try. This makes the bullies even more furious, and they start bad-mouthing the poor boy. But Zyke continues to defend his new friend. Soon enough, the adult dragon examiner announces that the exam will now begin. All applicants must take a number tag after registration and proceed to the second gate. Lajik suggests the hero withdraw if he isn't sure about the exam or lacks the ability, but Zyke seems confident even though he doesn't know the content. The first test is to scratch a rock, and the one who manages to do so will pass. Only provided weapons can be used, or the individuals can go with bare hands. The students have 3 attempts. Zyke finds the test way too lenient, which shocks his friend because he thought the exam would be of a terrifying level. The test begins, and Lajik starts panicking while our boy remains calm. The stone used in the test possesses regenerative properties, allowing it to repair any minor damage almost instantly. Furthermore, any attack driven purely by brute force is reflected back with hundreds of times the original impact. Lajik explains that one must properly circulate ether source power within the body during the strike in order to leave a scratch. The hero understands that this quality is more about the handling of ether source power than martial skills. Most of the students seem like they can pass the exam, including the bullies. There are consecutive disqualifications going on. Finally, it's time to test the hero, and he refuses to take any weapon. They ask the hero if he's sure about going with his bare hands, to which he agrees. Everyone starts discussing him, thinking he will eventually fail, while Lajik is concerned for him. As the test begins, the hero carefully analyzes the stone. He realizes that the rock must have formed over 1,000 years ago, as he had never encountered such a mineral before. Just then, he raises his fist and, using his full power, he obliterates the regeneration stone using his Dragon Slayer combat form and passes the exam. The crowd suddenly falls silent as the results were unexpected. Lajik is filled with pure joy along with surprise. Standing nearby, the examiner narrowed his eyes, wondering if the hero might be an illegitimate child of a powerful house. After all, only warriors of 4 or 5-star rank were capable of such a feat. As a reward, the hero was handed a green potion, though he was uncertain of its significance. Later, Lajik explains to him that he got a healing potion of a normal grade. Zyke wonders if this could be an elixir, a potion made from extremely rare materials. It contains unique herbs with pure elixir cores from divine and phantom beasts, which are so rare to find. The potion healed both old injuries and recent wounds while dramatically boosting one's ether. Due to its scarce ingredients, it was incredibly difficult to refine and almost never appeared on the market. Lajik added that the potions produced by House L-Dragon far surpass those sold in ordinary stores. The hero feels astonished while his friend keeps praising him. With that, the bullies also pass the exam, and it's Lajic's turn. He chooses to scratch the rock with a sword and fails to do so. It's his last attempt, and the bullies are already starting to abuse him, mentioning how it is expected from a half-dragon. Zyke then advises him to use a spear instead of a sword, which doesn't seem to suit him because he is struggling to make a single dent with it. Everyone is laughing at him for being weak, but the hero saves his friend by making him switch his weapon to a spear. Lajic's father was never allowed to enter the dragon's nest, and they even make fun by calling him a mock dragon. But he never gave up and raised him, so now Lajik wants to prove everyone wrong. However, he is not sure how to use the spear correctly. Zyke advises him to thrust it straight without thinking too hard. It is thought impossible for someone holding a spear for the first time to thrust straight and damage a regeneration stone, but he should not judge himself without even trying. They both just met today, but since the hero believes in Lajik to his fullest, then Lajik wants to believe too. Without wasting another second, he thrusts the spear straight into the stone and feels like it was part of his body from the start. To their surprise, he not only scratched the stone but pierced right through it. Zyke is very impressed and cheers loudly for him. And this is how he passed the exam, which he couldn't even believe himself. Tears of happiness fall down his face while the bullies are all tense. With this, the test is over and the entrance ceremony begins. Zyke wonders if there was only one test, but his friend explains that there might be another after their entrance. The head of the Eldragon family enters to give them their congratulatory words. Zyke comments on the head's gloomy face, while Lyach tries to quiet him down. There, Zyke meets the Eldragon family's current forces with quite a few 6-star levels among them, which seems like a decent force. Ballas Eldragon is the head of the family, appearing to be on an 8-star level. This star level was barely found in a dozen people in the whole world 1,000 years ago. Zyke seems to have a hatred against his own father. There come the words from Lord Ballas suggesting they become the flesh and blood of Eldragon. His aura is so powerful that the students barely manage to breathe. Everyone is crushed by his strong pressure. The hero realizes he couldn't stand him. Just then, an elderly dragon praises the Lord's gracious words, claiming that these are all just a matter of wording, while everyone feels relief as the atmosphere changes. Soon enough, one of the warriors informs them that the dormitory assignments will now be announced, and those who are called should move at once. Zyke is curious if they are not going to the same place, to which his friend explains that there are 4 dorms in the Dragon's Nest. Students who are allowed into the building are assigned to one of the 4 dorms: East, West, North, and South. Zyke is assigned the East dorm. He roams inside, struggling to find his room, and finally reaches it to present a warm greeting to his roommate. Surprisingly, he has Lyach as his new roommate, and they both seem happy. Zyke seems to have no plans for today, and his friend informs him that training will start tomorrow. Because the hero didn't know about it and was not paying attention to the announcements, his friend scolds him. The hero was planning to ditch this boring place and go on a trip, but the regeneration stone, the healing potion, and other interesting things crossed his path. So now sticking with the Eldragon house for a little longer doesn't sound bad to him. 1 month has passed now. There is a training session going on which helps in teaching the Dragon's Breath. This method was made by the 15th head of House Eldragon. Some of the students have already mastered this technique, like Lady Lyca, who appears to have reached the 2-star rank. Then there is Zyke with his extraordinary skills and 0 teachings, which makes the trainer wonder if he inherited the head's powers. The Dragon King's breath technique of the hero was modified and passed down as Dragon's Breath. These techniques are ways to draw ether from the air into a body and circulate it, which can help in enhancing one's ether. How well they work is influenced by the user's skills, and this is the reason each noble house refines its own style and guards its finished techniques. But if this technique only works while standing still, it is useless for the hero because his previous Dragon King's breath technique let him use ether while moving without breaking breath, and its effects are huge. But since it is a difficult one, only a few inherited it. The hero simplified it so anyone could use it to make their clan stronger. He never thought it would evolve and survive even after his reincarnation. Later during dinner, Zyke suggests Lyjik eat, or else he won't get stronger because he is weak and needs to train harder. While he was thinking about how some of them are well trained, Lyca interrupts the hero, mentioning that he was amazing earlier. Lyjik gets super nervous and informs him that she is the head's daughter. Being truly unbothered, our boy mentions that he is also the head's son. He keeps ignorantly answering her questions while advising Lyjik to eat food rather than spacing out. This makes her excited, and she offers him to become her subordinate because, being an illegitimate child, he needs allies. She wants him to help her become the next head, and in return, she will reward him generously. But he calmly refuses the offer. Even when she tries to bribe him with the head's potions, he rejects. Lyca can project her ether outside her body, which is pretty impressive to achieve at her age. He aggressively informs Lyca that he has no interest in being the head and will not serve anyone because he's the strongest. Lyca offers him a fight, and everyone reaches the training ground to witness the match. Zyke realizes that things turn serious while Lyjik informs him that she's not only Lord Ballas's daughter, but also has the blood of the Typhon, one of the 4 great houses backing Eldragon. Like other kids, she is a genius, and at just 7, she mastered every form of her house. Unfortunately, this is new to the hero because he only knew her as the head's daughter, but still, he seems confident. And not knowing things makes him even more excited. Even though his friend keeps insisting that he doesn't stand a chance in front of Lady Lyca, both fighters are more than ready. Zyke asks her why she is forcing a fight on him. It is because she aims to secure the position of the next head by taking him down and claiming the seat to make him serve under her. When the hero seems clueless about his own family, Laika asks if it is because he is illegitimate and explains that, including her, there are 5 heirs competing for the next head, and everyone carries blood from one of the 4 great houses of Eldragon except him. In order to secure her place, she wants to defeat him right away. With that, she swings her massive sword like it's nothing, but the hero effortlessly dodges the attack. Her strikes just keep getting faster, and everyone understands that this is what it means to be a child of the head. Laika keeps throwing her attacks while Zyke is continuously dodging them without putting in any effort. Lyjik is also surprised. The hero praises her unexpected fighting styles, but she insists he keep fighting. He does so and throws a punch, taking her down, wondering why she can't manage to land a single hit on him, to which the hero confirms that she is far quicker than most of the 1-stars he has ever met, but in the end, she is still just a 1-star. He further explains how he observed her breaths, the twitch of her muscles, and the shape of her eyes to track her movements, and the rest is just experience. Laika isn't ready to give up and strikes him again, but instead ends up getting slammed. He is impressed how she gathered true source power in her core to withstand that blow. When Lyjik tries to interrupt, Zyke suggests he stay back. Just then, that lady reaches the 2-star level, which is obvious by her aura. At this level, one can project true source power outside the body shaped for martial arts, and that projection is called aura. According to her, it is the hero who helped her break through to the 2-star level, so now he doesn't stand a chance. With that, she throws a fast and powerful hit which the hero couldn't manage to dodge completely. Now the hero is facing a different style, true Thunder Spirit Great Sword Arts, which makes him even more excited. Laika uses her Thunder Raid technique and a Thunder Light Flash Strike. At first, the hero seems to enjoy it, but later realizes that her level is way too much and that much lightning will be hard to handle in his current state. It's just 1 star that makes this much of a difference between both of them. Her movements are simple, just like before, but the instant she turns to a 2-star level, that Thunder Spirit Great Sword Art explodes in power. She was fast, but she is faster now. And the strange part is the lightning wrapped around her body, which was impossible to achieve 1,000 years ago. The hero cannot counterattack because he is uncertain about that power. The hero has a lot of confidence as he is still smiling in a situation like this. This irritates his opponent the most, and she keeps launching her lightning strikes towards him. Still, the hero is standing on his feet. As Lyjik insists, Laika decides to stop if he surrenders and swears loyalty to her. Since the hero refuses, she claims she will use every inch of power to end this fight. With that, there comes a Thunder Spirit first secret art technique, Heavenly Thunder, and the hero is lying helplessly on the ground. The match is declared to be over, but to their surprise, Zyke stands up again, hitting an electrical strike, making his opponent curious. He explained how he was purposely taking her hits in order to study them, and somehow he can use them as well. While he was taking those attacks, he kept using his Dragon King's breathing technique, which reacts with her lightning energy. Lightning starts generating inside his body, and he can control it himself without even realizing. He doesn't know much of the details, but according to him, her entire clan has a special constitution, and he receives a great lesson by fusing both techniques. On top of that, thanks to Lika, he also reached the level of 2 stars, and the fight isn't over yet. Zyke seems to experience the extraordinary traits of strength and will soon get his understanding on it. Lyjik is tense, witnessing the true strength of the heads, and even Lika's lightning hits are not reaching the hero. The fight goes on between the two, and after a while, the hero decides to end it by creating a new technique or a special form. While his opponent is lost in thoughts, he decides to take charge and uses his special form dragon-slaying arts to strike a blow and takes her down in an instant. The fight was fascinating, and Lika is now in disbelief at her defeat because she even needs to surpass her brothers in order to become the next head. The hero is impressed and praises her skills with a smile. He even motivates her to learn new things since this isn't the last time and she has to fight him again. Zyke offers Lika another battle some other day while she considers him an unbeatable individual. After a few hours inside the fissure, Lord Ballas is training his dragon combat arts first form. A warrior interrupts him, reporting about his daughter, that she reached level 2 star, which is quite fascinating at her age, and by the time of graduation, she could reach level 4 or even 5 star. The Lord is still not bothered and orders him not to waste his time and to talk to him only when she can use the talent herself. The soldier informs him that she was recently defeated, and the one who defeated her is his own son, Lord Zyke. Ballas understands because his mother also had the talent for battle, but she was long gone by the time Zyke was born, so it is curious who could have taught him skills strong enough to defeat a 2-star, but he is informed that Lord Zyke reached this level on his own without any teachings. In this case, Lord Ballas commands the first trial to begin, which is premature, as most of the students haven't even reached the 1-star level. But according to him, that is equal for every individual. No matter if they have trained or not, those who cannot survive the first trial have no future. and he declared them to be unworthy of Eldragon. He commands to summon Frina back to oversee and conduct the trial, and have her keep a close watch throughout. The next day, there is usual training going on for dragon combat art. The hero is mastering Ibuki Dragon's Breath, which was developed by the 15th generation and called a combat art. In essence, it is a body enhancement technique well constructed so even children can learn it easily. Lajik asks why he is not training, but the hero has already mastered it. Lajik is surprised because it was only taught a few hours ago. Zyke asks him to turn around and develops a channeling route to transfer his energy. His friend is impressed and thinks that this training might be boring to him because he has already defeated Lady Lika. Dragonslayer combat technique is an overwhelming power, along with the spatial form born within the hero from the battle with Lika. He believes that the final form also exists, which can slay the divine dragon itself. Zyke is curious about how these dragon techniques can be handled. Since the hero has mastered all the dragon combat art techniques, he is back on usual physical training. Just then, Lajik requests him to provide training because he wants to grow stronger, and the hero agrees because he sees his friend as someone worth teaching. Soon enough, Lika also requests him to train her as well because the way he overwhelmed her in the fight earlier makes her want to get even stronger to surprise her brother and the hero himself. Zyke agrees to train her as well, but asks if she is fine since her wounds should have put her down for a month. But as she used a healing potion, it's nothing to worry about, otherwise, she would be resting in bed for a month. Lika again confirms if he is fine training her and doesn't need his own time to train. The protagonist is ready to train both young talents. Later, he asks Lika if she is fine being trained by the person who defeated her, but she is ready to do whatever it takes to get stronger and claim leadership. The hero asks the reason for her obsession with this position, to which she explains that if she doesn't manage to claim leadership, according to family customs, she will end up being married off. In the best case, she will marry her cousin, and in the worst, it will be a stranger. The hero gets quite upset, and his hatred increases for the way people are treated like breeding stock. Soon enough, an announcement informs everyone of the arrival of a new instructor who came all this way to guide them despite her busy schedule, so they advise everyone to be grateful. Frena Windkick from the Black Dragon Corps steps up. Observing Lika's reflexes and sharp, flawless aura, they introduce her as Frena Windkick. She warmly greets them all and recognizes Zyke, asking about his lack of a surprised reaction. The hero confidently mentions how there is nothing to be surprised about and mentions her intriguing skills, which makes Frena understand why the head was so concerned about this boy. The hero takes interest in her martial arts as there is no sound even from her boots. Later, she advises everyone that they must pass her test, in which they have to take crystal orbs and spend 1 month on Poisonous Dragon Mountain. It is the home of countless venomous beasts, and even brushing against a single poisonous weed can kill anyone instantly. Zyke used to train there in his past life. If their crystal orbs break or go missing during the task, that student will be immediately disqualified and expelled from the academy. She advises them to control their breathing with the dragon breath technique, and as long as they keep the orb intact, they will be fine. Regarding monsters, she suggests killing them or else there won't be any food to survive the month. The students have 5 days left in which they can each choose and learn one of the Eldragon family's basic martial arts, and survival will become easy once they get a fighting style. But for those who couldn't manage to train in these 5 days, she isn't responsible. Children throw an innocent question about whether she will help them in danger, but as expected from the Eldragon family, only the strong remain. So if someone can't win, he or she will simply die. Panic spreads among the students while the hero wonders if this family has changed this much. Just then, Frena distributes the manual for each weapon. While Lajik is struggling to choose his weapon, Zyke advises him to pick a spear, the one he used in the earlier test. He even suggests Lika pick an axe, which will cover what she's lacking. After that, Frena advises everyone to train as if their lives depend on it, or else they will die. She further informs them that during their test, the upperclassmen will try to steal their orbs as part of their own task. But since the forest is huge, the chances of crossing paths are rare. A wave of fear spreads among the students. Zyke suggests they team up if they can't manage on their own. While he chooses to go it alone, he casually invites them to eat before training. 5 days later, it's finally time for their test, as they have all gathered to enter the forest. Layak nervously says that the time has arrived, while Lika nods in agreement. He questions if he is truly fine to work beside her, and mutters that many belong to noble families while he is only a commoner. His fellows appear from behind and tell him that he is at the same level as them. Celine steps in and claims she also cannot believe they are working with Lika. Lika calmly replies that there is nothing to disbelieve and reminds them that all were chosen for their abilities. Layak tightens his grip on his weapon and vows to give his all, and Raymond promises to live up to expectations. Lika brightens and counts on them, then turns to Zyke and asks if he is sure about going solo. He nods with confidence while the others become nervous. Lika admits that she feels nervous too, but Zyke raises his brow and tells her that everyone there is talented enough. She questions him, and he tells her that she and the others are sharp, and their team's test will be easy, while Layak mutters that Zyke always remains confident. The new instructor steps forward and draws their attention. She observes them carefully and praises their group formation, stating that teamwork will ensure survival. She asks for their crystal orbs and explains that each must protect their own until the end of the 1-month trial on Poison Mountain. As all orbs are identical, Zyke wonders if losing one means they can replace it. Frina continues and explains that on the mountain, they will face upperclassmen who will attempt to steal their orbs. A student asks if any of them have not reached the 1-star level, while another student claims the task sounds easy. Frina commands them to proceed to begin the exam. They rush toward the mountain. Lika turns to Zyke and says she will meet him after the exam, then commands her group to move. Zyke waves calmly and Frina questions if he is not nervous. He smiles faintly and replies that he is fine, then steps forward as she watches with quiet curiosity. As moonlight spreads, an officer beside her questions if the exam is too harsh. Another officer agrees and says the group still lacks combat experience and wonders how many will truly endure. Frina assures them that the monsters on the mountain are not too strong, and teamwork will help them survive. The officer nods in agreement and Frina mutters something about releasing something. He asks for reassurance, but she brushes it off as nothing, then commands another group to head into the jungle. As the team moves ahead and spots a lone student, one archer immediately fires an arrow, but Zyke catches it easily and smirks. They look in disbelief and murmur in confusion, but before they can react, he dashes forward and gestures for the real game to begin. Celine thrashes monsters with her full force as another creature leaps from behind, but Raymond raises his shield and strikes through it. Layak charges forward with his spear and pierces another monster. Lika praises them, and when they glance at her, their eyes widen at the sight of a pile of dead frog monsters around her. They claim that she truly cleared too many by herself. She chuckles softly and remarks that her 2-star level surely helps. She adds that both of them have gained 1 star since the week, while Layak lowers his head, but others encourage him, telling him that he will earn his star soon. Lika agrees and states that defeating the monster frog without a star is no small feat, and praises his flawless spear work after training with Zyke, then commands them to head back before nightfall. As they near their base, Lika halts upon seeing a senior student waiting ahead. The senior smirks while Lika questions if he has come to steal their orbs. The group tenses, and Raymond lifts his shield. The senior nods and claims that the test itself is to steal orbs, and admits he did not expect to encounter her base first. Lika warns him to leave before they kill him, stating that he cannot face them alone. Before she acts, 3 more seniors appear from behind. The lead one unsheathes his sword and strikes at her, ordering her to surrender. She dodges and the others rush forward. Raymond shields, Celine fights back with strength, and Layak struggles to resist. While the opponent demands his crystal, Layak remembers Zyke's advice when he once asked how to face a powerful enemy. Zyke had told him that it was impossible for him to win against 3 or more upper-class fighters, yet there was still a way. Logic had questioned the method, and Zika had smiled and instructed him to exploit an opening. Logic had asked how to find it, and he told him to endure and keep doing it until the opponent exposes it because the weaker one cannot force an opening by himself. Logic had clenched his fists and asked if he could truly endure that long. Zika explained that endurance itself won the battle, and that defeating a stronger opponent through patience is greater than strength, and that only Licha might be an exception to that rule. Zika had reminded him to first believe in himself and not overthink. Just wait and strike when the chance appears. Now Logic grits his teeth and holds his ground, and when the opponent loosens his guard for a brief moment, he charges and drives his spear straight through him. Meanwhile, Lika continues battling her own opponent. The senior resists but realizes her strength surpasses his. Even though both are 2 stars, she knows that it is from Zika's advice and ends the fight with one decisive strike. She rushes to her team and asks if they are fine. They cheer, and Celine congratulates Logic for reaching 1 star, while he is still in disbelief. Lika smiles and remarks that with everyone holding stars now they can survive the exam, and wonders aloud what Zika might be doing. At a distance, a girl from the last group runs, trembling and questioning what kind of monster he is. Around him lie the bodies of the rest of the members, and Zika stands among them. The scattering upperclassmen are running away screaming to save their lives. They've encountered a literal monster, one that casually took them out. Meanwhile, our boy is chilling, calling them cowards for running away. Bro basically said, "I'm not trapped in here with you, you're trapped in here with me." The kids are running faster than Usain Bolt just to escape an inferior first year. They were the ones who were supposed to hunt him. but the tables have turned. One upperclassman slips and falls. It's like a horror scene as he watches Zika chillingly ordering him to stand up and at least try to fight. His golden eyes glare into this kid's soul, making him regret every life decision. It's so bad that the kid ends up fainting out of fear. I imagine Batman's glare must feel the same for his enemies. Zika is a little disappointed how easy it was to dismantle the group, even though they were acting so tough at the beginning while jumping him. Noticing someone spying on him from a spot, Zika calls the person to come out already. Seeing as they refuse, he takes it as a sign that he isn't breaking any rules and is free to do anything he wants. Anyway, the person spying on him is revealed to be an upper dragon captain. This guy is stunned to see a mere first year wipe the floor with upperclassmen, and the same kid even managed to call him out for spying. Intrigued, the captain intends to report the situation to his leader. He returns to the scarlet-haired beauty who demands a mission report. Her men start off from the very beginning. In 1 week of the test duration, 32% of the kids have dropped out, but the ones who survived are quickly adapting to their environment, which means numbers won't stoop lower than that. But the moment she asks about the condition of the upperclassmen, her men hesitate. The same guy who observed everything reveals how the upperclassmen are running for their lives. The instructor is starstruck by his words. It seems baffling because there aren't any monsters beyond the level of the upperclassmen to threaten their lives. So, the big question is, why are they running? The guy blurts out one name, Zika. He has become a catastrophe. The demise of the upperclassmen, single-handedly hunting them down like insects. No one wants to be around him anymore. He's cutting them relentlessly, and he's on the chase instead. It's a situation so abnormal that they've never seen anything like it before. Even when it comes to Zika being the son of the patriarch, the kid is crazy. He's not just a prodigy, he's a generational talent that can be classified as a literal monster for his age. Even the instructor remembers their brief but weird interaction, realizing that his strategy from the very beginning was to move alone, knowing he'd unleash hell upon his victims. To put it simply, Bro never even entertained the idea of being hunted. He was thrilled to do the hunting instead. Her factual glazing of Zika entices the squad until suddenly they notice the arrival of something they've been waiting for. Frenna tells the laborer to unload it on the spot while the rest of her squad members start to question what the fudge is up now. This woman is consistently increasing the difficulty of the exam and intends to release some kind of monster at the 3-star level. Not even the upperclassmen should be able to withstand it. The sadistic woman assures them that she made certain adjustments. First, it is conditioned to only target students of the 2-star level or beyond. This means kids without a star or even with 1 star won't be affected. But the big question is, why is she doing this at all? Interestingly, Frina reveals that it's a direct order from Lord Eldragon, the head of the family. She's genuinely curious about the outcome of this exam, especially concerning the so-called monster that Zyke has become. She wonders if the kid can handle something of this caliber and instructs her men to release the creature by dawn. Dawn does arrive. Logic and Celine instantly sense the ground trembling. Lady Laika's sharp instincts inform her that something is coming, even nastier than the upperclassmen they faced. At first, Logic assumes it must be some kind of large monster, but Laika knows full well that whatever it is, it's terrifying. The rumbling of the ground continues, startling the students as they all begin to worry. Laika immediately realizes that the tree behind them is toppling down, so she roars at everyone to move out of the way. Luckily, she was able to protect Celine, and Raymond managed to guard Logic, making sure none of them got any injuries. Shaken by the sudden collapse of the tree, Laika grips her sword to challenge the threat, while Logic and the others stare at the creature with fearful eyes. Standing before them is a massive, terrifying stone golem, one they never thought they would encounter on the mountain. I love how this is the isekai version of getting out-of-syllabus questions for your exams. Meanwhile, our boy is in a completely different location, sitting on top of monster corpses and unconscious upperclassmen. True manhwa fans will remember that one familiar scene with Arthur from the beginning after the end. Anyway, this guy is bored as hell. He's so strong that no one can match up to him, acting like he's the Gojo of this exam. But then suddenly, he senses an ominous presence in the distance. This isn't just any monster, it's something higher than the 2 class levels, which makes him wonder if the instructor is trying to send him a message. Still, it's weird to use this creature against kids who are only 2 stars at best. Besides that, Instructor Frina should have informed them about this at the beginning, but then he realizes that this sadistic woman released it on purpose, making him wonder about their plans. However, this is the perfect chance for him to cure his boredom. Motivated, Bro jumps off from his pile of victims and makes the 3-class monster his new target. Unfortunately, he's going to have to spend a while going there since it's far away. Back to the golem onslaught, Celine tries to slash the stone monster with her sword, and of course, doesn't seem to deal any damage to its hard body. She doesn't leave a single scratch, but somehow Raymond thinks he's the main character and whacks his shield. Again, no scratch at all. Finally, Lady Laika goes all Zenitsu mode and activates her lightning-style Thunder Flash technique. That ultimate move just now barely chipped the creature. This confirms that only attacks filled with aura can damage the golem's outer shell, which means anyone below her rank is practically useless here. Logic begs her for a plan while she rallies them, explaining her strategy to play decoy to distract the monster, allowing them to escape. None of them want to follow this plan because it means she'll be left behind, but Leica basically calls them weak NPCs who will only get in her way. She managed to do a tiny amount of damage even after landing a powerful aura attack, which means the rest of them can't do anything with their power of friendship Naruto mindset. Her words are right, and though it's true they can't take it down, Raymond steps up with his shield, vouching to support her just to make sure she lands all her attacks. Leica thinks this is a reckless move, but Logic and Celine are also ready to support her, just as long as she can deal some form of damage. The power of friendship convinces her, and she orders her friends to cover her while she prepares. Lady Leica charges her attack and blitzes past them with thunderous aura. The golem reacts quickly to smash her into the ground, but Raymond is there to block the weight of the blow. Even then, it stuns his body just to block a single hit. He takes a time out while Logic and Celine tag in to distract the golem with repeated attacks. This allows the main assailant, Leica, to jump the golem from behind with an aerial slash. Activating her Thunder Spirit Greatsword arts, she hammers the behemoth with divine thunder, leaving trails of lightning in the sky. Upon the conclusion of the attack, the monster seems nowhere to be found. Logic comes to her rescue as Leica seems staggered and lost. She used all her energy just to activate that final trump card, but at least they managed to take out the monster, so she's happy that Raymond and the others are okay. But that happens to be their biggest misunderstanding, as the golem suddenly emerges from the smoke, extending its hand towards the unguarded Leica. In the end, the monster snatches her in its grasp. While her friends are useless to help, she knows she made a huge mistake without confirming the kill. While Celine is terrified that the monster is still functioning fine, even after basically a mini nuke. Logic wants to play a hotshot and charges in with his spear to help her, but the golem casually snatches her away, causing Logic to scream and worry. Suddenly, a gigantic tree is tossed all the way from the sky, whipping its way towards the golem. The monster is smashed with the weight of the tree, simultaneously freeing Leica in the process. Logic and his party take her to exit the dangerous area. Not knowing what the hell happened, Zeke arrives with his special entry, joining in all the fun. He doesn't even care about his friends and feels ecstatic for his next victim's demise. Before all this happened, he could spot Leica's momentous final attack from far away. He knew her group was trying to defeat the monster, but found himself severely limited in reaching them in time. In his prime Kobe Bryant era, he would have instantly teleported with insane speed. Even though Leica's group is pretty good, they just can't beat a 3-star monster. It's more like a game of survival for them, a countdown until they get wiped out. Knowing he couldn't run fast enough, our boy decided to experiment with something new. Carving his fingers into the heart of a tree, he pulls it straight from the ground, showcasing insane levels of strength for a child. Then this kid sends the tree flying to God knows where, hoping that it probably becomes a ballistic missile and hits the monster. Zeke felt really good about what he did just now because this tree-throwing technique is actually something much deeper. He talks about the dragon nurturing arts. The L-Dragon combat manual is given to students before taking the exam. It's an ordinary technique booklet, not really a proper style, but a guide to unlock more efficient strength. The good thing is that it proved helpful to Zeke because in his past life, he took advantage of long-range attacks as the first head. Anyway, after tossing that tree, Bro started running again. Back to the present, he greets his friends who are shocked to see him. Logic reminds him about the dangerous golem coming to kill them all, but instead of running away, Bro feels amused to challenge a powerful monster. Interestingly, the creature doesn't seem to boast any form of life force despite having a presence. While he's casually holding a conversation, the 3-star behemoth whips a powerful punch his way. The punch slams Zeke head on. But here's the kicker. This kid catches it with a single palm. Thanks to his genius battle IQ, he can tell right away that the monster won't be affected by normal attacks. And though he could easily wipe it out with aura, he doesn't want to finish things so soon. Leica watches him practically toy with the same monster that gave them a run for their money. Anyway, the golem attempts to slam him with both hands, causing Zeke to reflect on the monster's incredible speed. Even for its enormous size, he ends up successfully blocking the slam, feeling some level of mild discomfort in the process. Zeke tells his friends to stay out of the fight as they could get hurt, causing them to flee. Now that he doesn't have to worry about going all out, Zeke shifts his weight and ends up flinging a monster 10 times his size. He still has to take care of the creature's hard shell, and wonders if the golem is just as sturdy on the inside. In order to test his theory, he powers up a punch and blazingly hammers it on the golem's body. This move is from one of the Dragon Destroyer combat arts, which he combines with a second style burst to pulverize the golem's interior. The The burst aspect of his technique doesn't just focus on breaking the shell, but actually crushing the creature from the inside. And just like that, with a single move, Bro one-shots the creature. Having gained some level of fun from the experience, a month passes after the conclusion of the exam, and we arrive at the main estate of the L-Dragon family. Here, Zyke is summoned. Much to his annoyance, he reflects on the conclusion of the earlier exam, as nothing significant happened after the Golem incident. Zyke's 7-year-old class members ended up dropping down to 70%, but the members who survived became familiar with death and ended up achieving the 1-star level. Shortly after the test conclusion, Zyke was forcefully summoned to meet the Patriarch, his father. While walking through the hall, he mutters his annoyance while Frina reminds him to give the Patriarch proper respect. She rants about how he behaved in the exam and basically spelled his own doom in the process, but our boy doesn't understand what she means. He didn't do anything wrong. Frina roars at him for obliterating the upperclassmen's test, attacking them and hunting them down when it wasn't really required. Because of that, not a single one of the upperclassmen managed to acquire an orb for their personal test. They even have to retake the exam. That's how bad he ended them. Frina is frustrated with his actions and begs him to fix his disrespectful tone when he meets the head. As the two of them finally arrive at the Patriarch's door, the reason she keeps lecturing him to tone down and be humble is because if he doesn't, he will literally get eviscerated from existence. Lord L-Dragon is a cold-blooded man who cares little for kids, and Frina doesn't want Zyke to get slaughtered like that. Even our boy feels intimidated after hearing that. Before entering his chambers, Frina announces her rank and mission intention. He allows her permission to enter, so the two of them go inside. Our nonchalant protagonist stares at the man sitting at his desk, his first encounter with the head of the family. Lord L-Dragon is mildly annoyed, and without even extending his greetings, the dude straight up demands to know why the kid attacked his upperclassmen. Responding casually, Zyke expresses his annoyance, questioning if he broke any rules by attacking. His response baffles the Patriarch, while the boy continues to argue that the only condition of the exam was to survive 1 month with the crystal orb intact. No other details or conditions were mentioned, so he followed what he was tasked. Zyke straight up grills his father, saying that he should have mentioned any rules before the exam began. Frina's face tells you everything. She's scared witless because just earlier she told him not to argue. She even tries to talk some sense into him while the boy's father releases an ominous aura, terrifying her in place. Just the sheer overwhelm of his pressure is enough to knock her down. With this kind of pressure, Frina thinks that Zyke is going to get murdered. Instead, he doesn't experience anything and mocks his father again for using petty moves at the slightest agitation. The Patriarch finds himself stunned to see him unaffected by the pressure. He pries further by asking the boy how he managed to defeat not only a fleet of upperclassmen, but also a 3-star golem. If that wasn't unbelievable enough, this 7-year-old just aura farmed his way through his overwhelming pressure too. It makes no sense in his eyes how a boy like him could manifest such damning power. Zyke realizes that the focus is being placed on the source of his strength, and instead of explaining properly, he just calls it his personal genius. Arrogance meets arrogance, both father and son eyeing each other down. Lord L-Dragon admits that the boy's attitude is rash, just like the report stated, but that won't matter as he still managed to beat a golem. His reward is an item from the Dragon Treasury, or access to the 2nd floor of the Dragon Hall, a choice between the two. What's most surprising to Frina is how this man went from nearly killing his son to now offering him a reward. Let's discuss both options. The Dragon Hall and Dragon Treasury are vaults, each filled with 1,000 years worth of collectibles ever since the time of Gilphus himself. It includes plenty of books, even those that are banned in the present era. It even contains the greatest weapons, artifacts, and every possible item one needs. The facilities are supposed to be the family's ultimate treasury, but they're monitored so strictly that only a couple of students are lucky enough to enter. The 2nd floor of the Dragon Hall is also special, requiring tremendous accomplishments for access. Frina can't believe her eyes. This kid is acting like a brat, and he still got rewarded by his pops. To piss him off, Zyke taunts his father to give him access to both rewards. Lord L-Dragon demands him to leave, but the kid disobeys a direct order and complains that he's got more questions to ask. Frina knows this clown is going to get himself killed through his tongue and grabs him to leave right away. She's like a worried mother protecting her child, but as she's dragging him away, the kid leaves on a final note. Zyke humiliates his father, saying that the more he tries to subdue his emotions, the further he will become from being the strongest. In that moment, Lord L-Dragon watches a manifestation of Zyke's might, making him an equal in potential. Frina shuts his mouth and takes him away, leaving Lord L-Dragon to reflect on the kind of presence he just felt. In the next scene, the instructor is ranting again, shouting at the idiot for acting disrespectful against the leader, ignoring all her warnings. Zyke tried his best but ultimately gave up. Hilariously, this is actually him holding back his words, which makes you wonder what else he could have said. Frina just doesn't get why he treats the teachers with respect but can't show the same to his own father. Considering the boy's strength and then his rocky personality, she deems him an unordinary child, even beginning to question his real identity, trolling her. Zyke states that he's just him. Frina internalizes that everyone in their family drank the ancient dragon's blood upon birth. The head of the family carries the might of a superior dragon too, which means by nature alone, they shouldn't be able to defy his wrath, and yet, this same boy managed to not only challenge his father but also hold his ground. He's something else, and she can't figure out what. Suspicious, she intends to check his birth records, but for now, she changes topics and asks him which of the two rewards he'll choose. Putting up an adorable little face, he picks both, much to Frina's annoyance. In the end, Zyke comes to his decision. He is in pursuit of knowledge. Having reincarnated 1,000 years into the future comes with a gulf in his understanding of the current age. That's why he's curious to know about the advancement of medicine and technology. His biggest fan, Logic, celebrates how he's able to enter the Dragon Hall. Both of them are excited. The thing is, Logic already learned dragon slaying and nurturing spear arts, but this is an even greater opportunity for him to master a new martial art. Lady Laika comes along, sharing that they needed to act quickly because there is also a time limit. The first floor is of the basic level, and they're told to borrow only one book at a time, which is why they needed to pick wisely. At the same time, Laika came to learn about Zyke's personal reward of being able to choose between the treasury or the hall. She's surprised that he ended up picking the Dragon Hall instead of choosing a weapon or something. Our boy would have definitely done that if not for the fact that he's way behind on the knowledge of the current era. The books of the second floor are the best part. They're rarer than even the first, and only Zyke has access to this level. Still, Laika thinks nothing in that library can surpass her Thunderclap greatsword art techniques. While she's glazing herself, Zyke zones off. In the next scene, the supervisor informs them that they only have 5 hours for the hall. It's hard to tell if this duration is considered long, but anyway, Laika comes up with a strategy to pick one book that they want to borrow and use the rest of the time to read others that can't be borrowed. Fast readers would benefit here a lot, but Logic is interested in honing a martial arts book to read in 3 hours. It's difficult to choose the right book for each person, especially in a hall as grand as this one. As they're teleported inside, the party members become ecstatic at the glory of the Dragon Hall, exceeding Zyke's expectations far more than he imagined. He sets his sights on obtaining a book that will knock the wind out of him, and so begins the reading experience. Zyke goes crazy the moment he touches the books. He's out here blitzing through content related to magic and chaos. It's too much information for him to just give up on. 1,000 years have left an incredible mark. Turns out that in that time span, their world ended up forming a connection with another one. Nearly 900 years in the past, a gigantic crack shook their reality, creating a dimensional wall called a rift. From it came the chaotic otherworld, the Chaos Realm. This world was inhabited by monsters birthed from the element of chaos, and in order to resist their wrath, the people of Zyke's world ended up forming primal energies within their bodies. The Eldragon family is responsible for aiding humanity against the tides of chaos. This allowed many bonds to form between families on the battlefield. 4 special warriors ended up marrying members of the Eldragon house, which ended up forming the Typhon, Fafield, Levas, and Bahamut factions. They're now considered the 4 great Eldragon families, and it all makes sense now, especially when the angry boar was covered in dark energy while Zyke fought it. Even Laika's thunderous aura exhibits such an energy. All of it came from a different dimension, but the most interesting part that stands out to him is the evolution of magic. With the connection to a dark reality came a new kind of technique. Can't find a book related to the contents of that technique, especially when something this brilliant should be hailed as a part of history. His excitement is so loud that he draws the supervisor's attention, insisting the boy keep quiet while reading. The strangest part is how there isn't a presence around him and he could still hear the voice. This makes him wonder if this is the same magic, the same new technique, something that can be used via voice. But the problem is that aside from ordinary primal energy, he can't tell what's special about it. Suddenly, all of his books end up floating in a trail of yellow, levitating all on their own. Zyke can't contain his reaction and finds himself amused with the technique. The supervisor tells him to be quiet again, but Zyke just can't contain his reaction at the verge of experiencing a new level of growth. While he was busy wasting his time being excited, the library suddenly ended up closing in on him. Threads of ether restrain him before tossing his ass out the door. Zyke barely holds himself together while sticking his landing, questioning what the heck just happened. Bro wants to learn the same ether technique and demands the guy use it again. Even Logic can't tell what's up with him, while Laika is confused why he's the only one who got yeeted out unlike the rest of them. Fortunately, Logic found an interesting martial arts manual that he borrowed called the Cloudwater Spear technique. Then there's Celine, who learned a movement art alongside Windblossom sword technique. Raymond got his fair share by practicing the Eldragon Guardian Sword technique in the library. He even got a book for his shield skills. Basically, they ended up learning the same martial arts that Zyke created in his previous life while trolling. Finally, he asks Laika, hoping to learn what she got from the experience. She reveals a book containing the Heavy Wave Greatsword technique that the 15th Lord improved. This is Zyke's second time hearing about the 15th generation, making him wonder what's so special about them. Anyway, the 15th Lord is also directly responsible for creating Dragon Slayer combat arts. Now, even though our boy made a ton of techniques that became important manuscripts in the hall, a lot of them were improved versions of what he created. This means the 15th Lord is responsible for their advancement, impressing even the likes of Zyke himself. At first, he thought that his school life would be nothing but filled with boredom, but now he's excited for the journey to come. We jump ahead 5 years into the future. Here, a 12-year-old Laika is looking around to find Zyke and her friends. She learns from Logic that our boy is at the training grounds. Speaking of the training grounds, Zyke is currently squaring off against 3 of his friends, having become much stronger by age. The scene transitioned to the private office of Ballas Eldragon. Ballas reviewed a thick stack of documents in silence. After a prolonged moment, he set the papers aside and lifted his gaze, inquiring whether the intelligence had been fully confirmed. Standing before him was Achon, captain of the Black Dragon Corps. His posture remained rigid, his expression unreadable. Achon reported that the investigation had verified the phenomenon. Spatial distortions and mana readings strongly suggested the emergence of a special rift, with an estimated 80% probability that a magic tower existed within it. Ballas released a slow breath. Of all possible outcomes, the rift had appeared in the most problematic location imaginable: magic water, a substance capable of transforming ordinary humans into mages. Those who consumed it developed a rare constitution that allowed source power to be converted into mana, giving birth to entirely new systems of combat, unfamiliar techniques, and revolutionary methods of warfare. Since its discovery, civilization itself had been reshaped, but progress came with bloodshed. Endless territorial conflicts erupted over ownership of magic springs, and in this era, the number of mages a house possessed had become the foundation of military dominance. Yet within Eldragon territory, not a single magic spring existed. For a house without access to a spring, there was only one method of acquisition: Special Rift Conquest. At present, the Eldragon family possessed only a handful of mages, Ballas included. Every one of them was a hardened survivor of previous Rift incursions. Even so, their numbers were dangerously low compared to rival great houses that controlled multiple magic springs. Eldragon was being slowly cornered through sheer numerical disparity. That reality was why Special Rift Conquest had become Eldragon's highest priority operation. Achon then presented the secondary complication. As expected, the rift's location threatened immediate conflict. It had formed within the abundant Dragon Forest, an ancient woodland largely under Eldragon jurisdiction. However, a significant portion of the forest overlapped with territory claimed by another great house, the Kerberos family, who aggressively asserted ownership and openly referred to the region as the Great Abandoned Forest. Achon spread a detailed map across the desk marked with terrain layers, mana flow anomalies, and spatial distortions. He pointed to the glowing epicenter, confirming that the rift itself lay within Eldragon territory. However, due to its immense scale and unstable nature, the spatial domain it generated would inevitably expand beyond fixed borders. The projected influence zone extended dangerously close to Kerberos lands. Given the Kerberos family's temperament, Achon assessed the probability of interference as extremely high, but Ballas remained unmoved. Noise and aggression had always been Kerberos's defining traits. Still, he did not underestimate the threat. Once the rift's existence became known, conflict would be unavoidable. And while spatial rifts imposed severe restrictions, limiting movement, coordination, and large-scale deployment, waiting would only invite disaster. If Eldragon hesitated, Kerberos would act first. That outcome was unacceptable. Without delay, Ballas issued his command. All dragon nests under Eldragon authority were to be alerted immediately. Preparations were to begin at once. A selection examination would be held to determine who was worthy of entering the rift. This would not be a contest of talent alone, but a test of survival itself. The scene shifted back to the academy training grounds. Laika stood facing Zyke, her demeanor uncharacteristically serious. Across from her, Zyke appeared entirely at ease, his posture relaxed, his presence steady. Without warning, Logic, Selena, and Raymond moved simultaneously. Their auras surged as they attacked from 3 directions, each strike carrying full intent. The moment their power flared, Zyke's gaze sharpened. He stepped forward, his movements fluid and precise, intercepting each assault with effortless control as if they carried no weight at all. The combined assault ended before it truly began. Zyke lowered his arms and calmly assessed them. Logic's spear technique was powerful but overly forced, disrupting the natural flow of his movements. Selena's speed and strike frequency were impressive, yet her attacks lacked sufficient weight and grounding. Raymond's shield control, however, was acknowledged as stable and steadily improving. With a faint smile, Zyke pointed out that all three of them were still far too passive. He explained that hesitation had no place in real combat and urged them to attack him again without restraint. Watching from behind, Laika muttered that the entire scene was absurd. Zyke glanced back at her and questioned whether she truly believed that. Laika responded sharply, stating that allowing oneself to be struck bare-bodied without circulating source power was absolute madness. Despite her words, Zyke continued slipping effortlessly through their renewed attacks, dodging and countering with casual precision as if their strikes carried no threat at all. To him, this was exactly what proper training looked like. He raised his arm confidently and remarked that his body alone had grown sturdy enough to withstand their blows, even without source power. He questioned whether she genuinely could not see that. Laika let out a long sigh, placing a hand on her forehead, saying that at the very least he should stop letting them attack him while he was talking. Even as they continued striking him, Lyjik muttered that Zyke was completely insane. Laika shook her head and added that in her opinion, all of them were just as strange for continuing to attack him, as if their efforts were not entirely meaningless. Raymond, still pressing forward, wondered how Zyke could possess such overwhelming defense without using source power. Selena added that it went far beyond what should be possible for a human body. Laika cut them off, stating flatly that Zyke should not be compared to humans at all. She reminded them that the seniors had long referred to him as the demon child of the Eastern Hall. Zyke glanced at her with mild offense and questioned whether that was meant to be an insult. As the training session continued, Zyke turned toward Laika and asked whether she had come merely to watch or if she planned to join them. Laika replied that the training itself was fine, but there was something important she needed to say first. She informed him that it appeared they would soon be encountering children from other dragon nests, and much sooner than expected. Lyjik froze in shock. Raymond admitted that he had always expected something like this to happen eventually. Selena asked whether it was related to the next test. Laika said she did not know the details, but the signs were obvious. The instructor's behavior, their movements, and their sudden changes in attitude all pointed toward an imminent clash. Zyke considered this briefly and realized he had never paid attention to such subtleties before. With a serious expression, Laika warned him to be careful, mentioning that the Western Hall had another candidate for the next family head, someone genuinely dangerous. Zyke's smile widened slightly. To him, things were finally starting to sound interesting. Several days later, the Eastern Hall training grounds were packed with students. Juniors stood nervously under the oppressive atmosphere, while seniors remained calm and imposing, their presence alone overwhelming the weaker students. Zyke and his group stood together, quietly observing. Zyke noted that everyone had been gathered into the arena without regard for rank. Laika nodded, stating that this was exactly what she had expected. Without warning, the gates of the training grounds swung open. All chatter died instantly as Frina stepped inside. Her presence alone silenced the area. She announced that in 3 days the students of the Eastern Hall would be facing the children of the other dragon nests. Shock rippled through the crowd. Panic spread among the juniors. Raymond frowned deeply. Selena fell silent. Lyjik stiffened, clearly unsettled. And Zyke smiled for the first time in a long while, genuine excitement stirring within him. Frina raised 3 fingers and reiterated the announcement. In exactly 3 days, every student present would face the children of the other dragon nests. Battles between dragon nests were traditionally reserved for graduation examinations after students had proven themselves. To announce one so suddenly left many stunned, unable to grasp why it was happening now. Frina allowed the confusion to linger briefly before continuing. She stated that there was a reason behind the decision, though she could not reveal the details. However, she promised one thing with certainty. Those who emerged victorious would be entrusted with a special mission. Zyke's eyes gleamed faintly. He did not ask what the mission was. Anything described as special within the academy inevitably involved danger, conflict, and growth, and to him, it sounded far too interesting to ignore. If Frina then explained the structure of the event, the tournament would follow an elimination format, where each of the 4 dragon nests would send 7 representatives. The Eastern Hall would select its 7 representatives, and that very day, a senior student stepped forward, confidently questioning whether the representatives would naturally be chosen from among the seniors. If Frina calmly asked why she would summon every student regardless of rank if that were the case, her implication was clear. The representatives would be chosen from all years, seniors and juniors alike, and that declaration immediately stirred unrest. Several senior students scoffed openly, questioning what juniors could possibly contribute in a battle of this scale. their dismissive gazes pressed down on the younger students before leaving. Eldragon stated clearly that she didn't care how, it was mandatory that the 7 students be selected today. Then a senior student strode forward with clear authority, and it was Rick, one of the strongest seniors of the Eastern Nest. He turned toward the gathered juniors, his voice sharp as he declared that the 7 representatives for the tournament would naturally be chosen from among the seniors. With an arrogant sweep of his gaze, he asked if anyone had any objections, and for a brief moment, silence followed. Then a single figure stepped forward from the junior ranks, and it was Lika. She stated calmly that she did in fact have a complaint, and according to her, there was no reason the 7 participants should be limited to seniors alone. She added that juniors, herself included, were more than qualified to compete, and Rick's jaw tightened as he muttered her name under his breath. Regaining his composure, he replied coolly that Lady Lika must be misunderstanding the situation. This was not a matter of noble lineage or status, he said, but one of pure combat skill, where in a head-to-head battle, experience and strength mattered above all else. Before Rick could finish his sentence, Lika released her mana and the air shifted. 3 brilliant stars manifested on her chest, shining unmistakably, and Lika calmly asked whether someone with 3 stars still lacked the necessary skill. The seniors stared in disbelief, and Rick's eyes widened slightly, his confidence cracking while someone among the seniors muttered under their breath, questioning when a 3-star junior had even appeared. Then Lika continued. She agreed that participants should be chosen by strength, but asked a simple question in return. Were there truly 7 seniors stronger than her? She demanded an answer, and if there were not, she argued, then the selection must include freshmen as well. Rick clenched his teeth and responded that Lika was an exception, a special case. Raising his voice, he insisted that no other junior could ever surpass the seniors, and that was when another voice cut in, remarking casually that Rick was being far too loud. Rick turned sharply irritated, asking what he had just said, and it was Zyke. He repeated calmly that Rick was shouting unnecessarily. Then, with an almost amused expression, Zyke stated that the seniors clearly believed all juniors were weak and insignificant. As he spoke, Zyke released his aura, not explosively but with terrifying pressure that rolled across the field. Smiling faintly, Zyke proposed something simple. Instead of arguing, they should fight, and from now on, everyone who wished to participate should battle freely until only 7 remained standing. Lika pinched the bridge of her nose, murmuring that things were escalating far too quickly. Zyke's eyes sparkled immediately. Without hesitation, he replied that of course he would. Then, turning slightly, he looked toward Logic, Selena, and Raymond, calmly declaring that they would be participating too. She knew how perilous this could become, yet she compelled herself to intervene before turmoil fully erupted. She clarified her proposal, a ranking tournament. Anyone who desired to participate would join. Over the next 3 days, their outcomes would be logged and standings determined objectively. Those who placed within the top 7 would represent the Eastern Nest. Seeing no superior alternative, and unwilling to retreat publicly, Rick reluctantly authorized the plan. Dismissing it as a futile exercise, he was convinced the result was already settled. Lika turned back toward Zyke and inquired whether he intended to participate in the qualification duels as well. Zyke's eyes sparkled immediately. Without hesitation, he replied that of course he would. Then turning slightly, he looked toward Logic, Selena, and Raymond, calmly declaring that they would be participating too. Logic stiffened in shock, asking if Zyke truly meant they were going to battle senior students directly. Zyke confirmed it without the slightest uncertainty. He reminded them of the rigorous training they had survived together, pushing far beyond their boundaries. He asked them what they planned to do if they did not validate their results here. Selena exhaled a quiet breath, admitting the tension was overwhelming, but fleeing would only prove the seniors right. Raymond followed, stating that if this was occurring, then he would give it everything he had. No excuses, no holding back. Naturally, the 3 took their places beside Zyke, forming their familiar formation. Seeing this, Lika turned toward the other junior students and asked if anyone else wished to join the qualification matches. The response was tentative. Some juniors whispered among themselves, pointing out that even if Lika and Zyke were confident, their rivals were still seniors, many with 3-star ranks. To them, success seemed impossible. Zyke listened in silence before muttering that he could not understand why everyone was already so disheartened. He stated that there was far more to acquire from fighting a superior adversary than avoiding them. Even failure carried value, experience, insight, and advancement that could never be obtained by standing still. After a brief pause, he added that it no longer mattered. The moment had already arrived as Zyke, Lika, and the juniors who stepped forward stood prepared. Zyke glanced toward the seniors with a faint, confident grin. Quietly, he remarked that it was finally time to see what the senior students were truly capable of. Rick shouted furiously at his fellow seniors, declaring that these juniors had become a complete annoyance. He sneered that no matter how hard they struggled, there was no feasible way they could win against seniors, reminding everyone of the obvious chasm in experience and rank. Several senior students laughed among themselves, mocking the juniors. One remarked casually that there was no need to go all out, and that they should treat the juniors with care. Another scoffed, stating that aside from Lady Leica, every junior present was only a one-star warrior. Sensing the anxiety spreading among his teammates, Zyke calmly asked what was wrong and why they looked so apprehensive. Logic admitted the truth. He said that their opponents were seniors, 3-star students, and that it was only natural to feel jittery facing people with such an advantage. Zyke responded without hesitation. He reminded them that they had trained together tirelessly. He pointed out that they had already proven their prowess time and time again during practice. More importantly, he told them that they needed to believe in themselves. His words carried weight. After hearing Zyke's calm assurance, Selena's tense expression softened into a smile, and Logic let out a quiet sigh of relief. The dread that had been gripping them loosened, replaced by renewed self-assurance. Across the field, Rick grew restless. He shouted again, ordering the juniors to release their aura and stop wasting time. He barked that they did not have all day to listen to pointless chatter, and demanded that Zyke step forward and face them at once. The combat began. From the sidelines, the other juniors watched in disbelief. They could barely grasp what was unfolding before their eyes. One by one, senior students fell. Logic and Selena stood victorious over their defeated rivals. While rumors spread rapidly through the crowd, junior students whispered among themselves, questioning what they were witnessing. Some wondered whether the seniors of this year were unusually weak. Standing calmly to the side, Zyke wore a wide, satisfied grin. He praised everyone sincerely, saying they had done an excellent job. He noted that Logic had greatly improved his deflection methods and had developed a sharper intuition for detecting openings in battle. Turning to Selena, he remarked that she had mastered the multiple motions of the Windflower sword technique far better than before. As for Raymond, Zyke acknowledged his growth in strategy and trickery, praising how effectively he used his shield depending on the situation. Zyke reflected quietly that all of their training had finally yielded fruit. He hoped they would continue to build confidence not just in practice, but in real combat. Leica had proven her strength as well. She defeated her senior opponent decisively, bringing him down with a single overwhelming surge of lightning energy. The sight left the remaining seniors in complete disbelief. They struggled to accept that junior 2-star students had defeated them so thoroughly. Standing over her fallen opponent, Leica questioned sharply whether this still was not enough. Rick's voice echoed across the training ground as he shouted that it was impossible, absolutely impossible, for 3-star seniors to lose to 2-star juniors. His expression twisted with panic the moment Zyke stepped forward into his field of vision. Despite everything he had just witnessed, Rick scoffed loudly, calling Zyke naive and insisting that these results meant nothing. Zyke responded by calmly releasing his mana. A powerful aura surged outward from his body, pressing down on the surroundings like an invisible burden. His voice remained composed as he addressed Rick directly. Zyke pointed out that Rick was obsessed with age, rank, and the number of stars, treating them as absolute truths. He stated that those things were nothing more than metrics, useful for reference, but meaningless in real combat. Zyke continued, explaining that true power was decided by only one thing: victory. If someone was weak, they lost. If they were strong, they won. It was that simple. Rick snapped back angrily, shouting that Zyke was an idiot. He insisted that the number of stars directly represented power and demanded to know whether Zyke truly lacked even such basic knowledge. Zyke merely smiled. He calmly asked Rick a single question: whether someone had stars or not, if their heart was destroyed, would they live or die? Rick froze. Zyke continued, telling him not to ignore the true essence of strength. Combat was not measured by titles, age, or stars, but by a single outcome, whether one could win or not. Rick's panic turned into rage. He shouted, demanding to know what nonsense Zyke was spouting. He reminded Zyke that he was a senior and declared that excuses like these would never work on him. He claimed he had been lenient only because Zyke was a child, but that it was now too late for regrets or tears. Zyke's expression did not change. As if bored, he asked whether Rick had finished with the verbal sparring. He remarked that children should act like children by moving their bodies instead of talking endlessly. Then calmly, he narrowed the situation down to what truly mattered. It was now just the two of them. Zyke asked what kind of martial art Rick had mastered. As his aura expanded further, Zyke invited him to show how much he had truly trained. Rick roared in response. He leapt into the air, his mana blazing violently as he displayed the full extent of his training and pride. His aura flared brilliantly as he descended towards Zyke, determined to prove his superiority. Before Rick could even complete his attack, Zyke moved. A single punch struck Rick squarely in the mouth. The impact shattered everything. Rick's body was sent flying sideways, crashing into the ground with brutal force. His pride, confidence, and authority collapsed in an instant. Zyke stood calmly over him, a bright smile on his face. He commented lightly that Rick had trained well, Leica muttered in disbelief that Zyke had defeated Rick before he could even demonstrate the results of his training. The juniors standing nearby silently agreed. The scene shifted to the West Dragon Hall training camp. The ground was littered with defeated students. Dozens lay sprawled across the training field, groaning or completely unconscious, their weapons scattered and their pride shattered. At the center of it all, one student sat casually atop a fallen opponent's back. In his hand, he loosely gripped a dagger that still glowed faintly with mana. His name was Vanille, from the Fafnir branch of the L-Dragon family, and one of the head candidates of the family. He looked around at the defeated students with clear disinterest and muttered that none of them were worth his time. Moments later, his subordinates approached from behind. One of them reported that the situation on their side had been fully concluded. Behind her stood the selected students who would represent the West Dragon Nest in the upcoming tournament. Among them was Retin, the same student seen during the entrance examination. Vanille's eyes shifted toward him. He clicked his tongue lightly and remarked that Retin was still a novice. However, his gaze lingered when he sensed the aura surrounding him. 3 stars. At that realization, Retin stiffened in panic and hurriedly addressed Vanille with respect, calling him head. Vanille's lips curved into a faint smile. He remarked that this was good, very good. He stated that he liked talented individuals and added casually that if Retin proved useful, he would consider taking him on as a subordinate. Without hesitation, Retin bowed deeply. Vanille did not even bother standing as he accepted the gesture. Still seated atop the defeated student beneath him, inwardly, Retin's heart raced. Someone of such overwhelming power had acknowledged his worth. As long as Vanille stood on their side, the West Dragon Nest would never lose. The prestigious special mission would be theirs without question. Retin was certain that Vanille would become the next head of the L-Dragon family, and when that happened, being one of his direct subordinates would place Retin far above the rest. The thought alone made his lips curl into a subtle, sinister smile. At that moment, one of Vanille's subordinates stepped forward again, her expression cautious. She informed him that there was something important he needed to know. Unbothered, Vanille asked what it was. She leaned closer and whispered that Lady Leica would be joining the team selected by the East Dragon Nest. Vanille's expression darkened instantly. He clicked his tongue and ran a hand through his hair, irritation flashing across his face. He muttered that this was going to be troublesome. Then he finally rose to his feet. With cold confidence, he stated that it did not matter how talented she was. Victory was already decided. The West Dragon Nest would win, complete the special mission, and prove their superiority beyond doubt. His gaze sharpened as he declared that he would show all of his siblings exactly what he was worth. The position of the next head of the L-Dragon family, he declared, would belong to him. The selection tournament had finally arrived. Around the vast arena, the chosen students from all 4 dragon nests were seated in groups, while the surrounding seats buzzed with noise as students exchanged glances, whispers, and tense conversations. The atmosphere was heavy, part excitement, part pressure. Lajik stiffened as he looked around. His shoulders tightened as he quietly remarked to Lika that far more people were present than he had expected. Lika glanced around calmly and explained that it was only natural. Students had come from every dragon nest to witness the tournament. Then, narrowing her eyes slightly, she added that many familiar faces were missing, those who had been eliminated during the selection exams. "Doesn't the number feel unusually small?" she asked. The realization struck Lajik all at once. Those who had been eliminated weren't simply absent, they were no longer acknowledged. They were the so-called fake dragons. Just like his father, Lajic's breathing grew shallow as his hands trembled. Lika noticed immediately. Without saying a word, she reached out and lightly tapped his back. She reminded him that regardless of who had fallen away, they were here. They had grown strong enough to be chosen as representatives of the Eastern Dragon Nest. That alone was proof of their worth. Lajik swallowed hard, then nodded. He stated firmly that he would give everything he had in the coming battles. Behind them, Zeke stood quietly, his gaze sweeping across the arena. Lika turned and smiled at him, noting how strangely calm he looked. Given the magnitude of the tournament, she found his composure unsettling. Zeke responded evenly that there was nothing special about it. He was simply observing the other students and evaluating their combat capabilities. Lajik immediately collapsed to the ground in shock. Lika sighed beside him, muttering that it was exactly what she had expected from Zeke. Only someone like him would treat a selection tournament as a live battlefield analysis. As Zeke continued observing the arena, 2 familiar figures approached from the side. They were senior students from the Eastern Dragon Nest, Aaron and Rick, both selected among the 7 representatives. Zyke noted quietly that they had changed significantly since their last encounter. Rick acknowledged it without hesitation. He admitted that his previous defeat had forced him to rethink everything. Since then, he had trained seriously, no longer relying on status or seniority. He declared that as a member of the L-Dragon lineage, he respected strength above all else, and to him, the truly strong were Leica and Zyke. Zyke paused briefly, then replied calmly that as long as Rick understood that strength carried responsibility, there was nothing wrong with that. Turning his attention back to the arena, Zyke silently analyzed the participants. Every student present, except those from the Eastern Dragon Nest, was a confirmed 3-star combatant. Yet, something stood out. There were no 4-star students. Still, among the crowd, Zyke identified 3 individuals whose presence felt different, fighters standing dangerously close to the threshold of a 4th star. Zyke's lips curved slightly. He wondered what kind of battles awaited him in this tournament. As Laika continued speaking with Logic and the others, a sudden presence closed in from behind. Someone wrapped arms around her shoulders with an easy smile, startling her mid-sentence. Laika stiffened in surprise. Standing nearby, Zyke observed the situation calmly, quietly wondering what was happening. The girl who had grabbed Laika leaned closer, speaking in a familiar, teasing manner. She remarked that it had been a long time and asked how Laika had been doing. With a playful glance around, she added that she hoped no one had been harassing her. Laika quickly reassured her that everything was fine and that there was no need for concern. From behind them, Logic spoke up cautiously, asking who the girl was. Laika hesitated for a moment, then muttered that the girl was her cousin. She formally introduced her as Sandy Typhon, the daughter of the head of the Typhona family. The name alone sent a ripple of shock through Logic, Selena, and Raymond. The Typhona family was one of the 4 branch families of Eldragon family. Sandy tilted her head, studying the group with open curiosity. She asked Laika who these children were. Laika smiled gently and replied that they were her classmates and her friends. At the word friends, Sandy raised an eyebrow. She commented lightly that it was fine for Laika to make friends and get along with others, but then questioned whether they were truly suitable companions for someone destined to become a future family head. Without softening her words, she asked whether they weren't a bit too weak to stand beside a head candidate. Their expression immediately tightened. Panic and discomfort flashed across their faces. Before Laika could respond, Zyke stepped forward. He remarked that Sandy would understand soon enough when she actually fought with them. Sandy turned toward him, mildly surprised, and asked who he was. Laika introduced him, stating that his name was Zyke, and that he was also a candidate for the position of future family head. Recognition flickered across Sandy's face. She asked with clear intrigue whether he was the rumored illegitimate son of the family head. Then she added that she had never expected a mere illegitimate child to still be alive. Zyke listened without reacting, a small, unreadable smile forming on his face. Laika frowned sharply and demanded to know why Sandy was acting this way. Sandy replied casually that regardless of his status, Zyke was still Laika's rival. She went on to say that surrounding herself with friends, or whatever these children were, would only weaken Laika's chances against the other head candidates. She finished by pointing out that none of them were even 3-star students, asking bluntly whether the Eastern Dragon Nest standards had fallen that low. Zyke responded calmly, his tone even and composed. He stated that if Sandy continued to underestimate them like this, she would soon find herself being caught off guard. Sandy's expression shifted instantly. Her eyes narrowed as she turned fully towards Zyke, demanding to know what he had just said. She coldly reminded him that he was nothing more than a bastard, someone without a supporting family or backing of his own. The only thing he possessed, she claimed, was the blood of the family head and nothing more. Stepping closer, Sandy confronted him openly. With a sharp, provocative gesture, she pointed a finger at him and asked whether he truly dared to speak so casually in front of her. Zyke remained calm. He replied evenly that it had merely been a piece of advice. That response only pushed Sandy closer to the edge. Her expression twisted with irritation as she began to release her aura. Before she could act, a figure stepped between them. The sudden interruption forced Sandy to stop. The boy who had intervened was Edges Van Blade, the representative of the North Dragon Nest. With a composed posture, he placed himself squarely between Sandy and Zyke, reminding her that this was not the place to cause trouble for other teams. Edges briefly glanced at Zyke. Despite standing before 2 powerful representatives, Zyke's expression remained unchanged, as if the tension meant nothing to him. Sandy clicked her tongue and told Edges to move aside, insisting that she was in the middle of something important. Edges responded with a relaxed smile, stating that he could not simply ignore the situation, especially with the selection tournament about to begin. Around the arena, students from all dragon nests were chatting, whispering. Then a commanding voice cut through the noise. At the sound alone, the entire arena fell silent. Logic. Everyone froze. The man who had spoken stepped forward and announced that the long-awaited selection tournament was finally about to begin. Hearing those words, Zyke's lips curved slightly into a confident smile. The man standing before them was Teach Menric, the captain of the Gold Dragon Corps, a figure infamous throughout the academy as an intimidating educator. Menric then stepped forward and raised his voice, drawing everyone's attention. He announced that the selection battle was about to begin. He explained that the match would follow a tournament-style elimination format, combining all 4 halls. First, the 4 halls would be split into 2 groups, and the winners of those groups would then face each other in the finals. The battle format would consist strictly of one-on-one duels. Each hall would send out 1 fighter at a time, following a predetermined order decided before the matches began. From the 7 participants of each pavilion, the side that managed to defeat 4 opponents first would be declared the winner, while the remaining results would determine first and second place accordingly. He emphasized an important rule. Once the match began, changing the fighting order was strictly prohibited. The chosen order itself was to be considered part of each hall's overall strategy. Then Menric delivered the final point. Those selected through this tournament would be assigned a special mission. At the mention of a special mission, Zyke's smile subtly widened. Among all things, missions were the only thing that truly stirred his interest. Menric continued, stating that this special mission was extremely important to the Eldragon family. Anyone who took part in it would be making a significant contribution to the family. Hearing this, Laika's expression hardened with determination. At the same time, a confident smile appeared on Vanille's face. Both of them understood the implication clearly. Contributing to the Eldragon family through such a mission meant taking a major step closer to the seat of family head. With that, Menric ordered everyone to begin determining the brackets. He instructed each hall's representative to come forward one by one and draw a stone from the box to decide the matchups. When Menric called for the West Hall representative, Vanille Fafnir stepped forward without hesitation. He calmly reached into the box and drew a stone. After glancing at it, Menric nodded and told him to return to his position. Seeing Vanille up close, Laika stiffened slightly. Vanille glanced in her direction, a sinister smile curling at the corner of his lips. Noticing her reaction, Zyke quietly asked whether she knew him. Laika answered in a low voice that this was the West Hall representative she had mentioned earlier, Vanille Fafnir, one of the leading head candidates of the Eldragon family. Hearing the name, Zyke smiled faintly. Looking at the West Hall's lineup, he noted inwardly that it wasn't just Vanille. Overall, the West Hall was filled with strong fighters. The other halls were clearly well-trained too, but the difference in power was palpable. The gap between the West Hall and the others could be felt by everyone present. Then Zyke's gaze landed on a familiar face among Vanille's group, Retin. Zyke muttered inwardly that it had been a while since he had seen that face. He recalled the entrance exam and acknowledged that Retin had shown considerable skill back then. Reaching 3 stars at this age meant Retin must have trained relentlessly, something Zyke found genuinely impressive. Meanwhile, standing with the West Hall team, Retin noticed Logic, his teeth clenched. He couldn't understand why Logic was here. Some of Retin's subordinates sitting among the students openly scoffed. They loudly mocked Logic, unable to believe that a so-called dropout like him had made it this far. Hearing this, Logic tensed up. Raymond standing beside him asked quietly whether he was all right. Logic replied that he was fine, but he could clearly feel it. Retin's gaze fixed directly on him, radiated pressure. Menric then called out for the North Hall representative. At his signal, Edges Van Blade stepped forward. As he reached into the box, Menric shouted for the South Hall representative. A purple-haired girl walked out confidently. She selected her stone and stepped back into position. Finally, Menric called for the East Hall representative. Without hesitation, Laika turned to Zyke and told him to go. Zyke froze for a brief moment and asked why he was the one being sent. Laika answered plainly that it was obvious he was the strongest among them. Zyke attempted to object, stating that in tournaments like this, the younger ones usually took center stage. Laika stared at him in confusion and reminded him that they were all the same age, then firmly instructed him to stop overthinking and go. Sandy shouted toward Laika, demanding to know why an illegitimate child was being sent instead of her. Laika replied without hesitation that it was because Zyke was the strongest member of the East Hall. Sandy immediately rejected the claim, stating that it couldn't be true. She pointed out that Zyke wasn't even a 3-star and insisted that this selection tournament was supposed to be a battle between head candidates Vanille and Laika. Before Sandy could continue, Laika cut her off. She calmly stated that the East Hall was fine as it was. A faint smile appeared on her face, one that showed absolute confidence in her group's strength. Once all representatives had drawn their stones, Menric ordered them to channel their source power into the stones. As each representative complied, the stones began to glow. The result became immediately clear. Menric announced that this would determine the brackets. The first match would be East Hall versus North Hall. The second match would be West Hall versus South Hall. The members of the North Hall were ready for battle ahead. Among them stood Sandy, and beside her, a large, muscular man whose presence alone radiated pressure. Seeing him, Logic stiffened and quietly asked Laika whether that person was really a student. Laika confirmed that he was. However, her expression showed hesitation. She clearly hadn't expected to face her cousin Sandy in the very first match. Sandy, on the other hand, released her aura openly. She thought this was the perfect opportunity. She declared loudly that she would crush Laika completely so that Laika would finally remember her position and her purpose. In response, Laika released her own aura, her eyes sharp and unwavering as she prepared for battle. Nearby, Edges glanced at Zyke with interest and remarked that he was genuinely looking forward to their match. Zyke replied with a relaxed smile, saying that it seemed they would get along just fine and that he too was looking forward to it. As the two of them stood side by side, identical stones glowing in their hands, Zyke's smile widened slightly. He truly couldn't wait for the battle ahead. Vanille sat calmly among the students, observing the arena with a detached expression. Not far from him, the South Hall representative and her team were also watching in silence, carefully studying the movements and reactions of the other halls. Soon, the announcement echoed through the arena. The first match of the selection tournament would be East Hall versus North Hall. Both halls stiffened as the news spread. Each side began preparing to send out their first representative. Rick clenched his fists tightly. With a tense expression, he muttered that he had to win this battle no matter what. Laika glanced at him with concern before quietly asking Zyke whether Rick would be alright. She pointed out that he looked extremely nervous. Zyke nodded slightly, acknowledging her concern. Instructor Menrick then raised his hand and announced for both sides' warriors to step forward. The arena fell silent as Rick moved into position facing the North Hall's warrior across from him. With a firm gesture from Menrick, the match officially began. Rick let out a loud roar as he gathered mana into his fist, determination burning in his eyes. Zyke calmly remarked that now they would see how things truly turned out. Laika replied that judging by Rick's condition, the fight looked like it would be difficult. She asked Zyke whether he thought the same. Zyke answered evenly that there was no such thing as a guaranteed outcome in battle. His expression shifted slightly as he added almost casually that this rule did not apply to him. When he fought, victory was absolute. Laika immediately told him that she had not been talking about him. Ignoring that, Zyke continued analyzing the match. He stated that in terms of pure skill, the North Hall fighter was not much different from Rick. As he leapt in the air, Zyke concluded that if Rick fought the way he usually did, he should have been able to win. Laika shook her head. She pointed out that this was their first time fighting in front of such a massive audience, and on top of that, he was carrying the pressure of representing the East Hall. That kind of stress could easily affect performance. Zyke agreed that she had a point. However, he added that the same pressure applied to the opposing side as well. Then his gaze shifted slightly. He mentioned that Sandy and Edges were exceptions. Laika felt it too, the oppressive presence coming from those two. Zyke explained that both Sandy and Edges were already on the verge of reaching 4-star level, and fighters of that caliber would not be shaken easily by crowd pressure. Inwardly, Zyke noted that Sandy, being Laika's cousin, wielded techniques from the same lineage. When the time came, facing her would likely become an important learning experience for Laika. The sound of impact echoed across the arena. Rick was sent crashing to the ground. The first match ended with North Hall's victory. Ren panicked as she watched the outcome and muttered that she had to win the second match. Laika told her not to be too nervous, assuring her that she would be fine. However, despite the encouragement, the second match ended the same way. North Hall claimed victory once again. Rick and Ren stepped forward, apologizing to Zyke for their defeat. Zyke only smiled calmly. He explained that they had simply been swept away by the intense atmosphere of the arena. They both agreed. Zyke reassured them not to dwell on it. He stated that if this had been a real battlefield where life and death were decided in a single moment, the outcome would have been completely different. This place, he reminded them, was a learning ground. It was not a battlefield meant for killing. It was a place where warriors competed using their own skills, a place where failure could be experienced safely. Zyke firmly believed that bitter experiences like today's loss would one day become fuel on a real battlefield. He urged them to keep moving forward and continue training. Hearing his words, both Rick and Ren responded with strong determination. Zyke then pointed out that despite everything, the team had suffered 2 consecutive losses that made the next match extremely important. His gaze shifted toward Lyjik. Turning to him with a cheerful expression, Zyke addressed Lyjik directly. Lyjik immediately panicked. He begged Zyke not to put any more pressure on him, admitting that he had been nervous since morning. His anxious ramblings spilled out as he remarked that to make things worse, his opponent is the super terrifying senior from the other hall. Overcome with fear, Lyjik began crying and clung tightly to Zyke. Zyke calmly reminded him that he had already fought against that opponent when the teams were originally chosen. Lyjik, still shaking, insisted that there had been no one that frightening in the East Wing. The thought of defeating such a terrifying senior in front of so many people filled him with dread. Zyke let out a quiet sigh. He realized there was no choice but to encourage Lyjik in a different way. Laughing lightly, Zyke placed a hand on Lyjik's shoulder and pointed toward his opponent, telling him to look carefully. Lyjik stared ahead in confusion, not understanding what Zyke meant. Zyke calmly directed his attention to the opponent's weapon and asked Lyjik to think about what he was holding. A sword. Though Lijik answered hesitantly, Zyke pushed the thought further until it became clear. He explained that the opponent was nothing more than a humanoid wielding a sword. Nothing else mattered. If the sword came forward, Lijik should dodge. If it was raised to cut, he should retreat. If it lowered to strike, he should advance. Zyke instructed him to focus on responding exactly as he always did to a weapon called a sword. Nothing more was needed. Lijik listened carefully. Slowly, confidence returned to his expression. He stated that he would act exactly as he always had. Seeing this, Zyke smiled inwardly. Lijik possessed exceptional concentration. For now, he simply needed guidance to focus properly. Once he could achieve that naturally, Zyke believed Lijik would rise to an even higher level. Nearby, several students began mocking Lijik, pointing out the difference in physique and claiming that someone so weak could never become a ranker. Lijik glared at them with deadly intensity. The ridicule stopped instantly. At that moment, Instructor Menric announced the start of the match, shifting all attention back to the arena. The instant the battle began, Lijik's opponent launched a sudden assault, activating the three-blade sword technique and executing a swift single-blade cut. The blade tore through the air, but Lijik dodged cleanly. Enraged, the opponent shouted insults and pressed the attack, activating the technique once more, driving his assault even harder. Lijik blocked the strike effortlessly, showing no trace of panic. Lika grew tense, worry tightening her expression. Lijik's friends noticed that the opponent was closing the distance, exactly the range where Lijik excelled, and anxiety spread among them. Zyke, however, remained calm. He told them not to worry and pointed out Lijik's eyes. Lijik was completely focused. Blue light began to shine from his gaze as his opponent continued attacking relentlessly. Every strike was dodged with flawless precision. Frustration twisted the opponent's face as he activated the three-blade Chaos three-leaf dance. At that moment, Lijik's eyes flared brighter. He activated the cloud and water spear technique. Using passing clouds flowing water, he cleanly intercepted the attack, leaving his opponent stunned and unable to react. Without hesitation, Lijik followed up, activating the technique again and unleashing flood drilling. His pole arm drove forward with overwhelming force. The strike landed directly in the opponent's chest. The impact was decisive. The opponent collapsed unconscious. Instructor Menric stepped in immediately, declaring the match over and announcing victory for the East Wing. Lijik exhaled deeply, a weak smile forming on his face. Beside him, Zyke could no longer hide his satisfaction. He calmly stated that this was finally the moment when everything would begin to turn around. The momentum had completely shifted. With Lijik's victory, the East Hall regained its footing. Soon after, Selena claimed the fourth round, decisively defeating her opponent. The fifth match followed the same pattern. Raymond stood victorious, leaving the North Hall stunned. Only one more win was needed for the East Hall to secure total victory. That final battle was inevitable. Lika stepped forward, facing Sandy Typhona across the arena. Lika spoke calmly, remarking that it had been a long time since they had last faced each other. For Sandy, the situation was dire. The North Hall now required 2 consecutive wins to turn the tables. This match would decide everything. 2 heirs of the same bloodline, 2 wielders of the Thunder technique. Sandy observed Lika closely before speaking, remarking that she had never expected the North Hall's elite to fall, especially at the hands of younger fighters who had barely reached 3-star level. Lika answered evenly, reminding Sandy that she had warned her before. The East Hall was strong. Sandy acknowledged this with a faint nod, admitting that she had underestimated Lika's teammates. However, she added that such things were ultimately irrelevant. Suddenly, Sandy's lightning mana surged, crackling violently around her body. She declared that the real issue had never been Lika's colleagues. To become the head of the Eldragon family, overwhelming individual power was essential, strength that stood alone. She stated bluntly that Lika would never be able to defeat her like this. Sandy continued, pointing out that despite everything, Lika was still only the second representative of the East Hall. She questioned whether Lika truly understood how dangerous that position was, and whether she truly grasped what was at stake. Lika glanced briefly towards Zyke, then returned her gaze to Sandy. She answered without hesitation. She understood perfectly. Lika declared that she had never given up on becoming the head of the family, and even if her opponent was Sandy, her own cousin, she believed she could win. Raising her sword, Lika pointed it directly at Sandy and stated firmly that this time would be different. Sandy narrowed her eyes, murmuring that if that was truly the case, then Lika should prove it. In the next instant, Sandy vanished. The students around the arena gasped in shock. Lightning flashed. Sandy reappeared behind Lika, her thunderous mana exploding outward as she swung her blade, declaring that if Lika truly believed herself capable, then she should demonstrate it with her strength. Lika reacted instantly. She blocked the strike head-on with her sword. The impact was overwhelming. happening. Lightning roared across the arena and Laika's feet dug into the ground from the force. Even so, she held her stance. But Sandy didn't stop. She followed with a second slash, faster and heavier than the first. This time, Sandy's eyes widened. It was like Laika was no longer behind her. From the sidelines, Edge's Van Blade watched the clash with calm intensity. He murmured to himself that, as expected, Sandy held the advantage, facing an opponent who had mastered the great Thunder Sword technique far better than Laika ever had. The real question was how long Laika could endure. Sandy answered that question herself. Lightning gathered violently around her blade as she unleashed Beast Thunder Sword Needle Thunder. The strike pierced forward with terrifying precision, faster than the eye could follow. Laika failed to fully deflect it. Blood sprayed as the attack cut through her defenses and she was sent crashing to the ground. From the East Hall, Selena and Ren gasped in shock. Laika clenched her teeth as she lay there, forcing herself to stay calm. She told herself that the wound was superficial. Panic would only make it worse. She had to breathe slowly and stand back up. Nearby, Logic muttered anxiously that it was too dangerous for Laika to be pressured like this. In response, Raymond spoke quietly, reminding him that Laika had trained under Sandy since childhood. This was not the first time she had faced her cousin's overwhelming strength. Laika rose to her feet. For a moment, she looked almost like her younger self, stubborn and unyielding as she advanced towards Sandy, narrowly dodging every incoming strike with minimal movement. Sandy clicked her tongue. She remarked that Laika still carried the same bad habit, wielding her sword with unstable control whenever her emotions surged. In response, Laika activated Thunderflesh, lightning wrapping tightly around her body to reinforce her movements. Sandy immediately countered with Scattered Thunder. The two techniques collided. Lightning exploded outward, tearing through the arena floor as the ground shattered beneath them. The air roared and fragments of stone were hurled in every direction. Laika staggered under the overwhelming force. Standing above her, Sandy looked down coldly and stated that it was exactly as she expected. That useless habit of Laika's had never changed. She added that Laika could not even claim to be the strongest in the East Hall. Sandy continued, saying that if Laika had chosen the North Hall instead, none of this humiliation would have happened. Despite her exhaustion, Laika forced herself upright. Her breathing was ragged, but still she declared that she could still win. With a cold, unwavering gaze, Sandy told Laika to lose. She stated bluntly that Laika would never be able to defeat her like this. Sandy added that if things were always going to end this way, she should have gone directly to her father from the beginning. Even if it had required force, she should have arranged for Laika to be brought into the North Hall. Yet, despite those words, Laika remained standing, facing her once more. Sandy clicked her tongue and muttered that Laika was the same as ever, stubborn to the end. If that was the case, Sandy decided, then she would teach her a proper lesson. In the next instant, Sandy vanished. Before Laika could fully react, Sandy reappeared behind her, her voice cold as she declared that this would end now. Laika tried to draw out her power, but Sandy's lightning-charged kick struck her abdomen first. The impact was devastating. Laika's body folded as the force tore through her, followed immediately by a flash of lightning that slashed across her side. She was sent flying, blood spraying as she crashed into the arena floor. Even that was not enough for Sandy. She leapt high into the air, lightning roaring violently around her blade as she prepared a new technique. From the sidelines, Selena and Logic gasped in disbelief and instinctively looked toward Zyke. Zyke spoke calmly, stating that another layer of Laika's limits was about to break. Logic didn't understand what he meant. Below them, Sandy pointed her sword down at Laika and ordered her to stop resisting and surrender immediately. She declared that this was the end as she prepared to unleash the true power of the great Thunder Sword technique. Lightning slammed down. The arena shook violently as the ground shattered under the overwhelming force. Thunder roared. Debris flew into the air, and the spectators were struck silent. Many students believed the outcome had already been decided. When the light faded, Sandy stood still, looking down at Laika's fallen form. Then she froze. Slowly, Laika pushed herself up. Her body was battered and bleeding, her breathing unsteady, but she was standing. Laika looked at Sandy and spoke, acknowledging that this truly was her sister's great Thunder Sword technique. Despite her injuries, she smiled. She stated that it was impressive. Sandy stared at her in disbelief, muttering that the attack should have been enough to end it. Laika replied that if this had been years ago, it would have finished her. But during the past 5 years, she had been training as well. With quiet determination and a faint smile, Laika declared that the fight was not over yet. The scene then rewound to the moments before the match began. Laika was tense, sensing it immediately. Zyke asked what was wrong, pointing out that she did not look like herself at all. Laika hesitated for a moment before admitting the truth. She said that the reason was simple yet heavy. Her opponent this time was none other than her older sister Sandy. Zyke did not immediately understand why that troubled her so deeply, so Laika continued. She explained that Sandy was the one who had taught her the Great Thunder Sword technique. Although Lika had learned the basics from her uncle, the current head of the Typhona family, the one who truly shaped her understanding of the technique was Sandy herself. Because of that, Sandy was not just an opponent, she was Lika's mentor, her benchmark, the wall she had never once managed to overcome. Lika admitted that she had never defeated Sandy, not even once. It was true that she had grown stronger over the past 5 years, but that only made the problem worse. If she had improved that much, then Sandy, who had always been ahead of her, must have grown even stronger as well. She admitted that although she had spoken boldly earlier, the truth was that she was no longer confident she could win. Zyke finally understood. With a small smile, he pointed to himself and reminded her of their training together. He told her not to forget the countless days they had spent sparring and the countless times she had been defeated by him. As Lika recalled those memories, being knocked down again and again without mercy, tears suddenly welled up in her eyes. Zyke laughed softly and asked whether it bothered her that much. Zyke explained that she had always had one major flaw. Whenever her emotions surged, her perspective narrowed. She stopped seeing the whole battlefield. That was why for the past 5 years her training had focused on maintaining a calm and clear mind, even in the heat of combat. Lika cried harder because from her perspective, Zyke had attacked her without hesitation every single time, smiling as if it were nothing. Zyke replied calmly that this too had been part of the allure. Lika snapped back angrily, demanding to know what was possibly alluring about being beaten senseless every day. He pointed out that the results were already there. Now Lika should be able to look at her opponent far more calmly than before. Lika admitted that this might be true, but she still did not know how much it would help against Sandy specifically. Zyke told her not to overthink it. He said that she should simply fight. Once the battle began, her instincts and talent would guide her. Upon seeing her opponent's movements directly, she would naturally understand how much the training had changed her. With quiet confidence, Zyke added that she had also received his guidance, the guidance of the strongest. Because of that, he told her she no longer needed to worry about past victories or defeats. Lika hesitated, then admitted that even hearing this did not magically erase her fear. Still, she thanked him, saying that she felt at least a little calmer now. Zyke nodded, clearly pleased. Then he asked one more thing, whether Sandy had truly been the one who taught her the Great Thunder Sword technique. When Lika confirmed it, Zyke smiled. He said that this made the situation perfect. He pointed towards Sandy and told Lika that this was her opportunity. Just like during training, she should carefully observe, absorb, and analyze her opponent's Great Thunder Sword technique. By doing so, Zyke said Lika would not only fight her sister, she would grow beyond her. Back in the present, Lika finally spoke with certainty. She stated that she had now been given the chance to observe her sister Sandy's Great Thunder Sword technique in detail. She explained that she had received it head-on, studied every movement carefully, and through that, she had finally begun to see something just a little. Sandy did not understand what Lika meant. Before she could ask further, Lika suddenly lunged forward. Sandy's eyes widened as she sensed something strange. Lika's blade felt different. For a brief instant, Sandy could not tell whether Lika's strike had slowed down or stopped. In that moment of hesitation, Lika closed the distance. Sandy shouted in protest, but Lika moved without pause, unleashing the needle of Thunder Sword technique. Lightning erupted at point-blank range, overwhelming Sandy and forcing her backward under the crushing pressure. Lika did not stop. She leapt into the air for a second strike. Sandy, struggling to regain her footing, could not understand what was happening. She demanded to know how Lika's movements had suddenly changed so drastically. Mid-air, Lika released the Thunder Flash Sword technique, her blade tracing a sharp arc of lightning. As she answered, she explained that it was a rhythm variation, something Sandy had always possessed and something Lika herself had lacked until now. She stated that she finally understood it, and all that remained was to put it into practice. Sandy warned her to stop, insisting that understanding something did not mean it could be copied immediately. But the battlefield told a different story. From the sidelines, Lyak and Selena shouted in excitement, cheering Lika on. Selena exclaimed that Lika's movements had completely changed. Zyke watched with a satisfied smile and remarked that fighting someone who used the same technique could teach far more than ordinary training ever could. Rick asked quietly whether Zyke truly understood why Lika's movements had changed so suddenly. Zyke replied that Lika had mastered her sister's Great Thunder Sword technique during the battle itself. He explained that this was the result of their training, receiving the opponent's technique directly while calmly observing it. Rick and Raymond listened in silence. Zyke continued, explaining that in the past, Lika had always become too excited during battle. Her vision narrowed, leaving her no room to maneuver. She had only seen her own sword, but the current Lika was different. She was calm enough to observe her opponent even in the middle of combat. By facing a swordsman who used an identical technique, she had reached a new level of understanding. Back in the arena, Sandy studied herself and declared that it was not over yet. She stated that such an improvised technique would not be enough to defeat her. Laika responded by readying herself fully. The two sisters collided once more. Lightning exploded outward from the arena, waves of energy crashing against the barrier. Sandy was pushed back again, her expression twisting in disbelief. She shouted that she could not believe she was losing in raw strength. As she advanced, Laika declared that if it came down to physical training, she was not inferior. She claimed that she too had trained with someone until she had been pushed to the brink of death. She then raised her blade and told her sister to witness her technique. With a sharp cry, Laika unleashed her celestial thunder tornado sword technique. A storm of lightning erupted, spiraling violently across the arena. The ground shattered under the force as Sandy was completely engulfed. When the lightning finally faded, Laika stood in place, gasping for breath. Sandy staggered, unable to keep her balance. With a faint smile, Sandy acknowledged that her sister had grown much stronger. Then she collapsed onto the arena floor. Silence followed. The announcement rang out clearly across the arena. The winner was East Hall. From the sidelines, Vanille, the representative of the West Hall, stared at the arena in disbelief. Beside him, Alan noticed his expression and asked calmly whether something was wrong. Vanille did not answer. As Laika walked back toward her team, Zyke spoke up first. He remarked that it had been a wonderful fight. Despite his praise, there was a trace of dissatisfaction in his voice, clearly unhappy that he had not yet been able to fight himself. Selena hurried over to support her. Laika smiled faintly and said that she was glad the match had been decided during her turn. As Selena helped her, Laika added that if she had lost, though she had never intended to, then Zyke's opponent would have been Edge's Van Blade. Zyke asked whether she knew Edges personally. Laika replied that she did not know him directly, but his reputation was well known. She explained that he was said to be the greatest genius the Van Blade family had produced since its founding. Hearing this, Zyke thought inwardly that from what he had observed, Edges truly did stand out above the rest, even among this tournament's participants. Laika glanced subtly toward Edges and admitted that even if Zyke were to face him, she could not confidently predict the outcome. At that moment, Menric stepped into the arena and announced that although East Hall's victory had already been decided, all remaining matches would still proceed until the very end. Lyjik gasped in surprise. Zyke questioned what that meant. Ren voiced her confusion as well, pointing out that the battles were supposed to end once 4 members of the opposing group had been defeated. Zyke also found the decision strange. Inwardly, he considered their true objective. It was obvious to him now. They wanted to see a specific match, Zyke versus Edges. Still, he concluded that it did not matter. With a calm smile, Zyke stated that as long as he could fight, that was enough. Edges Van Blade stood ready as well. The clash everyone was waiting for was inevitable. Edges then remarked that although the North Hall had already lost, he was genuinely glad that he could fight Zyke under these circumstances. Zyke showed brief disbelief, wondering whether Edges had truly been that eager to fight him. Edges confirmed it without hesitation. He stated that Zyke was the representative of the East Hall. He continued by explaining that even with Lika present, Zyke had been chosen instead. That single decision alone had awakened his curiosity. He wanted to know who Zyke truly was. Edges pointed out that Zyke carried the blood of the family head. From his observation, Zyke was still only a 2-star fighter, and yet, despite that, he had been chosen as the representative over Lika. With a bright smile, Edges stated that this contradiction was precisely what made him want to cross blades with him. Zyke fell silent for a brief moment. Then he replied that just as he had expected they would get along well, he admitted that he had been looking forward to this fight as well. Edges asked amused whether Zyke was feeling excited. Zyke responded that there were many strong fighters present, but Edges stood out. He mentioned that Edges was famous, praised as a once-in-a-century genius of the Van Blade family. Zyke stated that it was only natural to want to fight someone like that. Edges slowly raised his katana, his expression sharpening. He remarked that he liked Zyke's attitude, and that his anticipation grew stronger with every word. As Zyke looked at the blade, he thought that it had been a long time since he had seen a katana like this. Menric's voice echoed through the arena, announcing the start of the 7th match. Edges vanished from his spot and lunged forward. For an instant, Zyke was surprised. Edges had crossed the distance in a single step. With a bright smile, Zyke noted outwardly that covering such distance with one movement was an exceptional mobility technique. Edges drew his katana in a single smooth motion, activating the 1,000-leaf katana bright sheath technique. Golden lightning erupted, flooding the arena. As the katana flashed toward Zyke as the blade descended, Zyke sensed something strange. The presence carried by the strike vanished completely. The katana was already less than an inch away. Zyke calmly concluded that he could still evade it. Edges' katana sliced through Zyke's body, cutting him cleanly in half, or so it seemed. Edges' eyes widened in shock when he saw Zyke standing calmly beside him, completely unharmed, as if he had never been in the path of the attack. Edges immediately realized that he had been deceived. At that exact moment, Zyke twisted his body, having already confirmed that the katana had struck, just not where Edges believed it had. A smile appeared on Zyke's face as he acknowledged the exchange. He remarked that the previous strike had been truly impressive and urged Edges to show him more. In response, Edges stated that such skill was expected from him. Then he stepped forward without hesitation. He shifted his stance and activated another technique of the thousand-bladed katana-style wavy leaf. As his katana moved, it carried a flowing force with it. The slash resembled water itself, fluid, continuous, and impossible to grasp clearly. The attack surged forward like a tide. Zyke evaded while smiling, noting that it was difficult to read the katana's trajectory when it flowed like water rather than cutting in a straight line. Even so, he began absorbing the rhythm of the movement. In the next instant, Zyke leapt high into the air. The water-like blade could not follow him fully, losing its pressure as it passed beneath him. With a bright face, Zyke commented that it was not bad, though he had no intention of letting himself be cut. Edges did not pause. Lightning gathered around his katana as he unleashed another technique, Brilliant Billion Lightning. Zyke dodged again. Narrowing his eyes, he stated that the katana's trajectory was unbelievably difficult to read. The strikes did not merely rely on speed, they distorted timing itself. As the exchange continued, Zyke realized that Edges was constantly shifting and flowing between movements. Despite the changes, he maintained both speed and power flawlessly. The katana's true strength lay in its efficiency. No wasted motion, no excess force. Each strike was precise, tuned perfectly to Zyke's breathing and rhythm. A sharp sense rang out as the edge of the katana grazed Zyke's clothes, slicing fabric cleanly without touching his skin. Zyke acknowledged silently that such control could only be achieved through relentless training. He muttered under his breath that the display was incredible. Edges, breathing steadily, admitted that he had never imagined he would fail to catch Zyke even after pushing this far. He openly stated that Zyke was truly remarkable and asked what kind of training could produce someone like him. Zyke answered brightly that if Edges was that curious, they should train together someday after this fight was over. With that, Zyke lunged forward. He closed the distance instantly, his fist drawing back before slamming toward Edges with explosive force. Edges blocked the punch with his katana, but the impact sent a tremor through his arm. His grip shook as he felt the raw pressure behind the blow. With disbelief creeping into his voice, Edges questioned where such strength came from. It did not resemble the power of a mere two-star fighter. Zyke adjusted his stance slightly as he analyzed the exchange so far. He muttered that he had deliberately varied his breathing, yet Edges had adapted even to that. Inwardly, he acknowledged that Edges was a far more skilled warrior than he had initially expected. Edges heard the remark and responded calmly. He asked whether that meant Zyke had already finished observing him, given that he had started counterattacking. Zyke replied that to a certain extent that was true. Edges narrowed his eyes and questioned whether Zyke meant his fighting style had already been fully read. Without waiting for an answer, Edges suddenly leapt into the air. His presence sharpened as he raised his katana, declaring that if that was the case, then it was time to show him more. Seeing the familiar motion, Zyke remarked that it looked the same as before. He shifted his body smoothly and dodged the descending strike with ease. However, Edges did not stop. In the same instant, his blood surged as he activated his residual image technique, leaving behind an after image that masked the true trajectory of the blade. Before Zyke could fully register the change, a sharp impact struck his chest. Zyke's eyes widened in disbelief as the katana's edge cut across him. He was forced backward, his feet skidding against the arena floor as he struggled to maintain his footing. Edges' expression changed slightly as he spoke again, asking whether showing that much was enough to meet Zyke's expectations, or if he should reveal even more. Zyke lowered his gaze to the wound on his chest. He remarked that Edges had actually managed to hurt him. A bright smile spread across his face, as calm and familiar as ever. With clear excitement in his voice, Zyke added that now it was finally starting to get fun, and everyone watching could feel it. This was no longer just a test. This was the moment the real fight began. On the sidelines, Sandy slowly opened her eyes. For a moment, she did not understand where she was. Her teammates rushed toward her in panic, asking if she was all right. Sandy nodded. Her memory returned. She had lost. Laika, her cousin, had defeated her. A faint but proud smile formed on her lips. Even in defeat, she had lost to family. She apologized to her teammates, stating that if she had won, their North Hall might still have had a chance at overall victory. One of her teammates immediately shook his head, saying they had been defeated first and that she should not blame herself. The others bowed slightly, apologizing for placing pressure on her. Sandy denied it calmly. She stated that their opponents were simply strong, that was all. Then, with a confident expression, she declared that next time they would walk forward together so that none of them would fall alone again. Her Her team nodded firmly in agreement. After a moment, Sandy asked whether the West Hall versus South Hall match had begun. Her teammate pointed toward the arena and explained that for some reason the battle had continued even after the result was decided. An incredible fight was happening right now. Sandy turned her gaze toward the arena and gasped. The duel was still ongoing. Edges stood in the center, aura blazing. He was preparing to unleash his 5 aura leaves technique. Her eyes widened. She did not understand why Edges was using his full power. Then she saw his opponent, Zyke, calm, smiling. She remembered Leica's earlier words. Zyke was the strongest in East Hall. Now she understood. He had pushed Edges this far. Edges unleashed the style of the 1,000-bladed katana 5 shaded leaves. The arena filled with overlapping after-images of his katana. The attack surged towards Zyke in a storm of flashing blades, but Zyke dodged every single one effortlessly, moving as if he were simply facing a worthy sparring partner. Edges narrowed his eyes. Even after such an intense exchange, Zyke's breathing had not changed. He asked what kind of body Zyke possessed. Zyke smiled and replied that he had also put effort into training the fundamentals. Martial arts were important, but the basics were even more important. Edges nodded slightly, acknowledging the truth in those words. He remarked that next time he would train his body more thoroughly. Then he attacked again. The 5-shaded katana technique surged forward once more. Zyke broke through all of it. The katana's hardness, its generation speed, its effective range, overall performance, medium-low. But considering Edges' age, promising, very promising. Zyke smiled inwardly, and in this battle, he finally confirmed something. The difference between martial arts 1,000 years ago and today. In ancient times, the moment of attack was everything. Martial arts were about expressing the phenomena of the universe through technique itself. The true power source only supported the art. It did not define it. But in the modern era, things had changed. Now, by materializing the true power source directly, practitioners could reproduce the phenomena of the universe itself. Control over the true power source that had become the modern essence of martial arts. Edges prepared to unleash the 5-blade katana once more and charged towards Zyke without hesitation. Zyke observed calmly. Inwardly, he reflected that he had been dazzled by modern martial techniques and realized somewhat late how fascinating they truly were. He effortlessly intercepted Edges' incoming strike and wondered whether even after 1,000 years, something could still feel this interesting. Edges quickly understood that every one of his attacks had been perfectly countered. He acknowledged inwardly that Zyke was beyond ordinary human standards. On the sidelines, Logic remarked that the two had been fighting for nearly 2 hours, and yet no clear victor had emerged. Leica observed that neither of them could be considered normal fighters, and quietly concluded that the decisive moment was approaching. Back in the arena, Edges admitted that his movements had been completely read. Zyke affirmed this internally and felt that the battle had been enjoyable. Edges likewise found satisfaction in the clash. Zyke then decided to show his respect by revealing what he had learned during the fight. He prepared to demonstrate a technique referred to as New Moon. Edges steadied himself, accepting that victory might not be possible, yet resolved to fight until the end. He activated the style of the 1,000-bladed katana secret technique, Extreme 5-blade katana. The arena trembled under the surge of energy. Zyke leapt into the air and gathered golden power around his fist. He activated the Destructor Dragon combat technique's second form. Dozens of compressed energy fists materialized and launched downward toward the arena. The impact was catastrophic. Shockwaves shattered stone, debris flew in all directions, and students scrambled for safety. At the same time, the massive barrage of energy fists ready to swallow Edges completely. And so the enormous explosion consumed the battlefield. Raymond raised his shield to protect his teammates from the overwhelming force. Even Sandy, watching from afar, was tense with anticipation. When the smoke finally cleared, Menric stepped forward and declared that the match had concluded. Edges lay on the ground, unable to move a single finger. He acknowledged that Zyke's strength exceeded his expectations and admitted that his training had not yet reached the required level. Zyke remained standing, victorious. East Hall's victory was officially announced. The surrounding students were stunned. Many could not believe that Edges Van Blade had been defeated and began questioning who the East Hall representative truly was. Menric then announced that after the arena was repaired, the battle between West Hall and South Hall would proceed. Logic and Raymond praised Zyke's performance, stating that his victory was expected. Leica commented that Zyke had once again destroyed the arena and remarked that he was strange in many ways. Zeke appeared unconcerned with the destruction. His focus had already shifted forward. Leica reminded the team that Vanille, another candidate for head of the household, would soon appear. Zeke observed that West Hall seemed to possess the strongest overall balance. However, he also sensed that South Hall had an individual whose presence stood out. A bright smile formed on Zeke's face as he wondered what would unfold next. After some time, Zeke's teammates sat in stunned silence, staring at the arena. Contrary to Zeke's expectations, the match between West Hall and South Hall had turned completely one-sided. Vanille stood calmly in the center of the arena as the South Hall representative lay unconscious on the ground. There had been no dramatic exchange, no prolonged struggle, only overwhelming dominance. Vanille glanced toward the fallen South Hall fighter, his expression filled with extreme hatred and frustration. Earlier, after the destructive battle between Zeke and Edges, Zeke had looked around at the shattered arena. He had remarked that he might have gone a little too far, and that it likely would not be repaired anytime soon. Logic, however, had smiled brightly and told him not to worry. Pointing toward the damaged side of the arena, to Zeke's surprise, the broken section of the stadium began restoring itself. He had been genuinely baffled. Logic explained that a rare mineral called etherite had been embedded throughout the structure of the arena. When true power was channeled into it, the material could revert to its original form. Zeke reflected inwardly that yet another incredible material had appeared in this era. Outwardly, he admitted that it was impressive. Logic agreed enthusiastically, stating that using something so valuable in such a massive structure was truly astonishing. In the present, Menric observed the outcome of the match with narrowed eyes. Something felt wrong for the battle to end so one-sidedly. It did not sit well with him. He questioned inwardly whether Vanille truly possessed enough strength to defeat Leela Sonar in that manner. Vanille noticed Menric's lingering gaze and asked sharply whether the match was to continue. Menric stepped forward and officially declared the match over, announcing West Hall's victory. He further stated that the final match, East Hall versus West Hall, would begin in 1 hour. The arena fell into puzzled silence. South Hall's representative, Leela Sonar, was carried away by her comrades as they urgently called for space. The crowd parted in uneasy confusion. On the sidelines, Lika could hardly believe what she had witnessed. Leela Sonar had lost without resistance. Zeke remained silent, his gaze fixed on the scene. He knew something was off. From what he had observed, the gap between Vanille and Leela had not appeared overwhelming. Yet during the match, Leela's source power had flowed abnormally. It had been unstable, distorted compared to its natural rhythm. In that condition, defeat had been inevitable. Zeke concluded that the fight had only appeared one-sided because something had been wrong with her. He also noticed that Menric seemed to have sensed the same irregularity. However, Zeke did not yet understand what's going on. Raymond spoke up, unable to hide his disbelief. Lady Leela of the Sonar family being rendered completely helpless felt impossible. He added that perhaps this was simply the difference expected from a candidate for the next head. Selena, though nervous, remarked that it had still felt excessively one-sided. Ren agreed, suggesting that perhaps this was merely the overwhelming strength of the major candidates from other halls. Since it was their first time witnessing such high-level representatives, judging accurately was difficult. Rick, wearing a bright but tense expression, pointed out that the next head candidates included Zeke and Lady Lika as well. If so, Lord Vanille must possess extraordinary power. Ren and Selena both nodded. However, Logic appeared troubled. Rick asked whether something was wrong. Logic hesitated before admitting that while Vanille had indeed been impressive, the entire West Hall group seemed on another level. Every member appeared strong. He apologized for sounding weak-hearted right before the final match. His teammates fell silent, acknowledging the uncomfortable truth. Ren admitted that she had lost in her previous match as well. As frustrating as it was, she was not yet at West Hall's level. Rick confessed the same. He had been defeated too. Even though others had advanced further than he had, he clenched his fists and declared that he had no intention of losing. Just as they had defeated stronger opponents before, he believed they could win again. Zyke listened quietly. A faint smile appeared on his face. That was the spirit. He thought that Rick and Ren might truly grow from this experience. Then his gaze shifted toward Laika. She stood apart, deep in thought. Zyke recognized the real issue. Laika did not seem to have noticed Leela's abnormal source power. If she believed the result had been purely Vanille's overwhelming strength, then her shaken reaction made sense. However, since Zyke himself did not yet know the full truth, he could not offer careless advice. He quietly wondered what he should do. Lajik soon noticed Lika's unusual expression and asked if she was alright. Lika immediately replied that she was fine, and as she walked away said she just needed to clear her head. Later in a garden outside the arena, Lika sat alone by a fountain. She couldn't believe that Vanille had grown strong enough to overwhelm Layla the way he did. Even Edgis had been unable to completely overpower Layla without suffering a scratch. Yet Vanille had done it effortlessly. The last time Lika fought Vanille was when they were 5 years old, and she had lost. Since then, she had trained relentlessly, determined to one day defeat him. She had believed she had finally caught up, yet what she witnessed today shattered that confidence. If the match order remained unchanged, Vanille's opponent would likely be Zeke. Strangely, she felt relieved at that thought since it meant she wouldn't have to face Vanille herself, but she hated herself for feeling that relief. It was as if she had already admitted defeat despite her long-standing desire to overcome him. Suddenly, Vanille appeared and asked what she was doing there. With a mocking tone, he commented that she looked awfully serious while sitting alone. Lika's eyes narrowed as she demanded to know what he wanted, stating that they had nothing to discuss and that she had no intention of talking to him. Vanille smirked and told her not to be so prickly. If he became the head of the L-Dragon family, she might end up as his wife. At those words, Lika stood abruptly and told him to be silent, declaring that she would be the one to become family head. She began walking away, but Vanille stopped her with his words. He said he knew she was thinking that she couldn't defeat him. He couldn't blame her since she had failed to beat him back then either. Surely she had seen what he did to Layla. As he casually draped an arm over her shoulder, he said he was certain she was thinking she couldn't defeat him after witnessing that fight, asking if he was wrong. Lika only told him once more to be quiet. Vanille then bluntly stated that she should just admit it. Back then, now and forever, she would never surpass him. He told her to give up and submit to him, promising that if she did, he would treat her well, tightening his grip on her shoulder as he spoke. Lika immediately shoved his hand away and shouted at him to stop talking. Vanille merely remarked that her reaction wasn't cute at all. Without another word, Lika walked away. As she left, Vanille coldly muttered that after placing his arm around her and gripping her shoulder like that, it was already the end for her. He then turned to his subordinate and said they both knew what needed to be done next. The subordinate replied that Vanille could leave everything to them. He then asked whether they shouldn't prepare for the illegitimate brat Zeke the same way they had prepared for Lika. Vanille responded that they could handle Zeke during the match, or even set things up while fighting him, although he admitted it would be best to prepare beforehand. Zeke seemed unusually sharp. If Zeke noticed their preparations, it would only complicate things. Besides, from what he observed, Zeke had deliberately allowed himself to be hit at times, so arranging things mid-battle would suffice. His subordinate agreed as Vanille bumped fists with him. He scoffed, saying that even if Zeke had defeated Edgis, he wasn't about to lose to some bastard child. Even without relying on tricks, as the water in the fountain behind them slowly changed color, Vanille declared that in this match, they would be the ones to win and claim the special mission. An hour after the scheduled time for the battle between East Hall and West Hall, Eric nervously said that the moment everyone had been waiting for had finally arrived. However, in his mind, he could not stop thinking about the reality of their situation. He and Marin were upperclassmen, yet among all the representatives of East Hall, they were the weakest. On the other hand, the group from West Hall was clearly packed with elites. Because of that, Eric could not help but feel a deep sense of anxiety and doubt, wondering if they could really win against West Hall. Suddenly, a fist flew through the air and struck him on the head. After punching Eric, Zeke called him an idiot and loudly asked what had happened to all the confidence he had shown earlier. When Eric admitted that it had only been an act, Zeke shouted and asked him why he was even fighting in the first place. Was he fighting just to lose? Eric immediately replied that it was not like that. Zeke then told him that if he was going to fight, then regardless of the difference in strength, he had to fight to win, and that was what truly mattered. Because of those words, even though a large bump had formed on Eric's head from the punch, he suddenly felt his spirit rise again and said that Zeke was right. He was going to fight to win. Zeke laughed and told him that was more like it. Eric needed to have confidence in himself. After all, Eric had trained hard before, so he should believe in his own abilities. Eric quickly agreed with everything Zeke had said and thanked him. Suddenly, however, Eric fell silent when Zeke said that he would give him a small parting gift. Zeke told Eric to relax his shoulders because the great power fist style was all about gathering all of his strength into a single point before striking. If Eric tensed up too much, the strength he should be concentrating would scatter. Instead, Zeke tapped Eric's shoulders and once again told him to relax. Immediately, Eric felt a strange sense of relief and confidence. He smiled and said that right now he felt like he could actually win his fight. Zeke replied that was good, then told Eric to go out there and win. As Eric walked toward the middle of the arena, Lika commented that what Zeke had done was strange. She knew that Zeke had never actually learned the Great Power Fist style, yet he seemed to know a lot about it. She also pointed out that sometimes Zeke seemed oddly knowledgeable about other martial arts as well. When she asked him why that was, Zeke simply smiled and said it was a foolish question. Then he calmly said that the answer should be obvious because he was Zeke. Hearing that, Lika could not believe she had even bothered asking such a question in the first place. Meanwhile, when Eric finally saw the opponent he would be facing, the first thought that came to his mind was that the man was a monster. He had already seen how this man fought in the earlier match. Even so, this time Eric felt confidence that he would not lose. Just then, Eric's opponent mocked him, saying that Eric was acting pretty cocky for someone who had lost to a North Hall punk before. Eric firmly told him to shut up, saying that he was not the same person he had been back then. Still, his opponent questioned whether Eric was really so sure about that. At that moment, Mentric announced that the first match between East Hall and West Hall would now begin. Eric's opponent immediately launched forward. Eric was momentarily shocked by the man's incredible speed, and before he could fully react, the opponent used his insect brawl dagger technique called Mantis Slash to attack while saying that someone like Eric could never change in just a few hours. Eric was forced to fall back while blocking the attack. His opponent could not believe that Eric had managed to defend himself using his aura. Nevertheless, he did not stop. He challenged Eric to try defending his next attack and immediately unleashed a barrage using his technique called Swarming Locust, raining down attacks on Eric. Seeing Eric struggling in his current situation, the opponent mocked him again, asking what the problem was and what had happened to all the confidence he had been talking about earlier. He said that he had thought Eric might have actually changed. Meanwhile, after receiving several injuries from his opponent's relentless attacks, Eric admitted to himself that his enemy was indeed strong, but that did not mean he could simply allow himself to be beaten one-sidedly. Eric immediately launched a punch in retaliation, but his opponent easily dodged it and told him that he was far too slow. At the same time, Eric received another blow from his opponent, who confidently declared that there was no way an attack like Eric's would ever hit him. Eric realized that at this rate, he would never be able to catch his enemy. He asked himself what he should do now. At that moment, he remembered Zeke's words. He needed to relax his shoulders because the Great Power Fist style gathered all of his strength into a single point. Eric suddenly fell silent for a moment before making a decision to gamble everything on a single attack. He returned to his stance and began gathering his aura. Seeing this, his opponent sneered and said that a weakling like Eric was surprisingly stubborn. The opponent then used a technique called Stinging Bee Flash in an attempt to break through Eric's defense. However, after taking the attack head-on, Eric suddenly smiled and said that he had finally caught him. His opponent was shocked when Eric grabbed and restrained his weapon. Eric then declared that it was time for him to take Eric's attack. Gathering all the aura he had concentrated into his fist, Eric unleashed the Great Power Fist technique called Great Power Fist. The powerful blow sent his opponent flying straight into the wall of the arena. The spectators fell into stunned silence. Meanwhile, Zyke simply smiled as Mentric announced that the winner of the match was Eric from East Hall. Eric's opponent had lost consciousness, his eyes rolled back and completely white. Eric's face immediately turned red with joy, and he could not stop himself from shouting in excitement over his victory. Sometime later, when Eric's opponent regained consciousness, he could not believe that he had been defeated by Eric. While holding his injured arm, he suddenly heard someone call his name. It was Vanille. The man quickly went before Vanille and knelt down, apologizing for losing his match. However, before he could even finish speaking, Vanille suddenly attacked him. The brutal act caused intense fear among the members of West Hall, including Retin. Vanille then looked coldly at the rest of his companions and asked if they understood what they needed to do. He told them that they must crush every opponent they faced. None of them dared to object and simply obeyed his command out of fear. Meanwhile, Eric confidently told Marin that she could definitely win her match. Marin nodded in agreement, while her opponent simply stared at her with a serious and unwavering gaze. When Mentric finally gave the signal to begin the fight, Marin immediately released her aura and rushed toward her opponent with great speed. As she charged forward, she used her red flame sword style technique called Time's Spark Slash to launch her attack. However, her opponent easily defended against the strike using his spear with precise timing. He deflected Marin's sword, causing her to lose her balance for a brief moment. Seeing the opening, her opponent quickly took advantage of it. After moving swiftly to Marin's side, he immediately unleashed the great wild spear-style technique known as Rampaging Pierce, striking Marin hard in the side. Because of the heavy damage Marin received from the attack, she couldn't help but drop to one knee and cough violently. Before she could even recover, her opponent launched another attack without hesitation. As the assault continued, Lajik could hardly believe what he was witnessing and could only mutter that the situation for Marin was looking bad. Meanwhile, as blood continued to spill from the wounds Marin was receiving during the fight, Lajik trembled with anger toward Marin's opponent, and even Celine said that she couldn't bear to watch any longer. Eric, now cursing under his breath in anger, was about to rush toward Marin's opponent, but Rield quickly stopped him, firmly reminding him that he was not allowed to interfere in the fight. Rield added that the match hadn't been officially called yet, and if Eric jumped in now, the East Hall would lose by disqualification. After some time passed, Mentric finally declared that the winner of the match between Marin and her opponent was the West Hall. While Marin lay there unconscious, her opponent arrogantly stepped on Marin's face as Mentric's declaration of victory echoed through the arena. Eric and the others immediately ran toward Marin, while Eric and Legique were filled with deep worry as they saw Marin lying there covered in blood. Zyke remained silent as he watched everything that had happened. However, the intense anger on his face revealed just how furious he was at the severe injuries Marin had suffered. As Legique and Celine continued to worry about Marin, Eric shouted Marin's name in desperation. Legique couldn't help but wonder if Marin would be alright, while Celine said that the injuries Marin had received from her opponent were far too excessive. Zeke, on the other hand, had a look of intense anger on his face, yet he remained silent as he calmly watched their enemies. As Marin's opponent began walking away from the scene, Eric suddenly shouted at him, raising his voice. Eric demanded to know if there had been any need for him to go that far. The opponent's expression darkened slightly, and when he turned back, he asked if they had a problem. When Eric asked what he meant by that, the man simply replied that what had happened was a battle, in other words, real combat, and he had merely gone all out to ensure a certain victory against Marin. Hearing that only made Eric angrier. He said that even if it had been a battle, what he did to Marin was still too much, especially since she had suffered severe injuries and lost consciousness. Celine also shouted in agreement, saying Eric was right and that Marin's opponent didn't need to go that far. The man merely smiled mockingly and said they were too soft. According to him, those from West Hall never showed mercy to their enemies in real combat. As he pointed at Eric and the others, he said that in West Hall they simply crushed their enemies, and that was all there was to it. Legique immediately stepped forward and walked toward Marin's opponent with a dark expression. She asked if what he had done was an order from Vanille. However, the man answered arrogantly saying, "So what?" He added that if they didn't like it, they could just forfeit. Then he asked Legique if she didn't understand what it meant that the referee hadn't stopped the match. He continued by saying that Marin had still shown the will to fight, and that he had only needed to break that will after that. He asked them if what he had done wasn't simply natural. Leica shouted again in anger, but Marin's opponent only complained that they were being too noisy before turning his back on them as he walked away. He mockingly told them they should worry about themselves first before worrying about their friend, because all of them would end up the same way. Marin did, not long after that. Retin suddenly stepped in and said, "That's just how it is." He added that they were welcome to forfeit right there if they wanted. Then he looked at Legique and asked if he had heard what was just said. Legique suddenly turned his head toward him, sweat slowly running down his cheek as he uttered Retin's name. Retin then casually said that Legique should start calling him by his name now, before immediately asking if Legique planned to forfeit their match. Legique remained silent. Retin mocked him again, saying that if Legique wanted to be toyed with like that girl Marin, he wouldn't stop him. He even asked if Legique wanted him to do the same thing he used to do to him back in the village, calling Legique a weakling. Legique lowered his head, his face darkening. Leica, on the other hand, was clearly furious at Retin's words, but Legique suddenly told Lady Leica that it was fine. Slowly rising to his feet, Legique said that he wasn't running away. This made Leica turn and look at him in surprise. Legique then declared that today, right here, he was going to surpass Retin. Retin immediately looked annoyed and demanded to know what Legique meant by that. Meanwhile, as Marin remained unconscious, the medical team continued treating her injuries, while the spectators silently watched everything unfold in the middle of the arena. Legique let out a deep breath while gripping his spear, when suddenly someone called his name, startling him. Legique was both confused and astonished because he immediately recognized the voice. It was Zyke's. When he turned to look at him, Zyke calmly told him not to worry because no one else could hear them. According to Zyke, he was speaking directly into Legique's mind. He explained that he had recreated this technique a few years ago after reading many books. As Legique wondered where he should even begin commenting on what Zyke had just done, Zyke told him that more importantly, the reason he used the technique was to give Legique a piece of advice. When Legique asked what advice he meant, Zyke said there is a saying, "Clouds drift freely and water flows gently." Legique began wondering what exactly Zyke meant by that proverb. Zyke continued saying that clouds drift without a care and water flows ever so gently. He added that whenever Legique was struggling, he should picture that image in his mind. Just then, Mentric asked what Legique was doing. Legique immediately apologized and quickly assumed his battle stance. Mentric then announced that the second battle between West Hall and East Hall would begin the moment Lyjik heard the start of the match. He moved forward and used his Cloudwater spear-style technique called Water Pierce to attack Retin. Retin was briefly surprised by Lyjik's speed, but he easily countered the attack and deflected the spear. Retin then told Lyjik not to get cocky, calling him a little weakling. He used his Serpent Strike sword-style technique called Ambush Pierce. His aura took the shape of a snake as it shot directly toward Lyjik's chest. As Lyjik defended himself against the attack, Retin sneered and said that was all Lyjik had behind his big talk. He mocked him further, saying Lyjik looked pathetic and calling him a little runt as he charged forward to attack again. Lyjik remained silent, raising his spear once more to prepare for the incoming strike. However, when Retin used another Serpent Strike sword-style technique called Serpentine Slash, Lyjik was caught off guard. The attack twisted and curved like a snake, making it impossible for him to block properly, and he was struck in the side. Lyjik immediately thought that he was certain he had defended against the attack, yet somehow, Retin had changed the direction of his strike mid-attack. Retin mockingly asked what was wrong with him and told Lyjik to try hitting him back if he even could. Determined not to lose, Lyjik declared that he could still attack and hit Retin. He immediately used another Cloudwater spear-style technique called Flowing Clouds and Water. But before their weapons could clash, Retin suddenly smiled. In the next instant, his attack curved again and changed direction, striking Lyjik once more and sending him flying away. The explosion that followed caused Lyka and the others to worry greatly, while Zyke simply remained silent as he watched the battle. After the dust slowly cleared, Lyjik could be seen kneeling on the ground while holding onto his spear. Lahik thought to himself that he had tried to deflect and counter Retin's attacks, but every move he made was being turned against him. Retin asked if Lahik had been thinking about using his movements to counterattack. Laughing mockingly, he told Lahik to give him a break. He called Lahik a poor guy before revealing that his specialty was countering Retin, then said it was unfortunate for Lahik because he was several levels above him in every way. Meanwhile, Lahik struggled to stay standing, gripping his spear so he wouldn't collapse. He said that what Retin claimed was impossible. However, Retin suddenly stepped forward, grabbed Lahik by the hair and said he didn't know what kind of delusion Lahik was living in. He mockingly declared that a child of a pseudo-dragon could never become strong. According to him, Lahik was nothing in the end, just a weakling like his father. Even while struggling, Lahik told Retin not to dare insult his father, but while holding Lahik by the hair, Retin punched him in the face and called him a fake dragon. Lahik fell to the ground, yet Retin continued kicking and attacking him repeatedly, while shouting that a fake dragon like Lahik could never defeat the real thing. As Lahik continued to receive heavy blows from Retin, he began to think to himself that he really was hopeless after all. He thought he had grown stronger, but perhaps it had all been a delusion because he was still weak. Tears slowly streamed down his face as the thought echoed in his mind that he was just a fake dragon after all. At that moment, a memory resurfaced. It was a time when he and his father were fishing by the riverbank. His father had asked if Lahik liked fishing, and Lahik's father said that he liked it too. He told Lahik that as he could see, he loved fishing while gazing at the clouds and the flowing water, just like he was doing at that moment when Lahik asked if his father liked clouds and water. His father smiled and said that clouds always drift so serenely, and the river water continues flowing endlessly. Watching them, he said, made him realize that human worries were actually very small and trivial things. When Lahik asked what he meant, his father simply replied that maybe someday Lahik would understand it as well. Back in the present, Lahik lay on the ground covered in blood as he whispered the words, drifting and flowing. Mentric remained silent as he carefully observed the battle. Soon after, Retin grabbed Lahik again and declared that this was where their fight would end. As Retin gathered his aura into his fist for the finishing blow, he said that a fake dragon would always remain a fake. He added that Lahik should crawl through life on his hands and knees. But when Lahik opened his eyes, he remembered Zyke's words before the battle began. Just like water flowing gently, Lahik's aura began to flow smoothly through his body. Before Retin's attack could land, Lahik managed to block it. Retin did not expect Lahik's sudden defense, and upon sensing the aura coming from him, he quickly stepped back and retreated to pick up his sword. Meanwhile, Mentric smiled in surprise at the unexpected turn of events. He had just seen the third star on Lahik's chest shine brightly, clear proof that Lahik had broken through to the 3-star level. Right in the middle of his battle with Retin, Retin's face darkened instantly, his expression twisting with rage at what he had just witnessed. More than anything, he could not believe that Lahik had actually broken through to the 3-star level in the middle of their battle. The realization only fueled his anger further. He refused to accept that Lahik now stood on the same level as me. Retin snarled, declaring that he would never acknowledge it as he prepared to strike again. He shouted that he would never accept that someone he once mocked had reached the same 3-star rank. Without hesitation, Retin unleashed his Serpent Strike sword style, Serpentine Slash, sending a swift and twisting attack toward Lahik. Despite having one eye nearly shut from his injuries, Lahik reacted with remarkable speed, effortlessly evading the strike, even as it shifted direction. Retin was stunned. That same attack had landed before, yet now Lahik avoided it so easily. A thought crossed his mind. Had Lahik already read the pattern of his attacks? The idea was unbearable. Refusing to accept it, Retin launched another assault, this time using rampaging Serpent Flash as he rained down relentless strikes. He shouted for Lahik to try and withstand this one, but once again Lahik moved with uncanny fluidity, dodging every blow with motions as soft and natural as clouds drifting and water flowing. Lahik could hardly believe what she was seeing, while Zaiki calmly observed and remarked that Lahik had just taken a step closer to the essence. Curious, Lahik immediately asked what he meant. Zaiki explained that clouds drift freely and water flows gently, never stopping no matter what happens. Like them, Logic was learning to accept incoming force and let it pass through him, adapting fluidly with every movement. Zyke added that he himself had demonstrated a glimpse of it earlier, but Logic had fully made it his own in this battle. Hearing this, Laika was left in awe, sweat forming on her cheek as she admitted she couldn't believe Logic had achieved that in such a short time. However, Zyke pointed out that Logic didn't even seem aware of it yet, and that his level of focus was truly extraordinary. Retin, on the other hand, could only curse in frustration as he watched everything unfold. For reasons he couldn't explain, fear began creeping into his heart. Shouting desperately, he warned Logic not to come any closer as he unleashed a barrage of attacks. Yet just like before, every strike was easily avoided. When Retin's sword finally clashed with Logic's spear, he couldn't withstand the force behind it as he prepared to attack again. Zyke suddenly laughed in excitement, saying that this was exactly it, because water doesn't always flow calmly. Seeing the attack Logic was about to unleash, Retin panicked. He turned and ran, cursing and questioning how Logic had become this strong. Meanwhile, Logic slowly formed a swirling water tornado at the center of the arena. Zyke declared that once water grows wild, no one can stand against its current. The attack struck Retin square in the chest, sending him flying as he coughed up blood before losing consciousness. Seeing Retin's condition, Mentric immediately declared the match over and announced East Hall as the winner. Logic stood there in shock, unable to fully grasp what had just happened as he questioned everything. Lycha and the others ran toward him, calling his name. Laika excitedly praised him, saying he was amazing and congratulating him on reaching the 3-star level and winning, right after she called it the best outcome possible. But Logic, still confused, asked if she was really talking about him, if he had truly broken through and won. When he looked over at Retin lying unconscious, disbelief filled his eyes. He couldn't believe he had defeated someone who had mocked and hurt him since childhood back in their village. Even so, he kept asking if he had really won. Celine happily confirmed it, saying his match was incredible. Stuttering, Logic finally admitted that he had truly defeated Retin. As he stared at him, memories flooded back, and before he knew it, tears began to fall. Eric immediately put an arm around him and asked why he was crying, then curiously questioned what that crazy move earlier had been. Still unaware, Logic asked what he meant. Laika added that she also wanted to know what that attack was. Rielt described it as a massive water dragon surging upward like a waterfall, saying it looked insane and incredibly cool. Logic could only shake his head, insisting he didn't know any move like that, but Rielt was certain that was exactly what it looked like. Then Zyke finally spoke, revealing that the technique Logic used was called Rising Dragon Pierce. Smiling, he explained that it originally came from the second volume of the Cloudwater Spear style. Even though Logic had only studied the first volume, Logic was surprised. While Laika immediately questioned how Zyke knew about the second volume, Zyke, however, couldn't tell them that he was the one who had created the technique. Laika then realized just how incredible Logic was. He had reached the second volume purely through self-study. Zyke went on to explain inwardly that the Cloudwater Spear style was a martial art he had created in his previous life. Though he didn't remember ever writing it into a book, most likely later generations had documented and divided it into multiple volumes, hiding its true essence in the upper levels, so immature fighters wouldn't access it. Yet despite that, Logic had carved a path to that hidden essence through his own strength alone. To Zyke, it was a wonderful sight, such young talent blooming before his eyes. Just then, Mentric called out to East Hall asking how long they planned to stand around chatting. Celine quickly apologized, while Eric suddenly suggested they ride this momentum and finish off their opponents. Celine nodded, agreeing to do her best, starting from Logic's match. East Hall's morale soared to its peak. However, West Hall also rallied after their loss, and the battles grew even fiercer in the fourth match. Celine fought well but narrowly lost, leaving Vanille sighing in disappointment. But in the fifth match, Riald pushed himself to the limit and managed to secure a hard-fought victory, bringing the outcome to the final rounds. As Logic supported him, Riald admitted he barely pulled it off, earning praise from Logic, while Eric lifted his shield and sword with renewed determination. Celine apologized to everyone, saying that if she had won the match, it would already be over. Lika reassured her, saying she had fought well, and reminding her that the rule was to reach 4 wins. They were now at 3 wins and 2 losses. Victory was right in front of them. Lika confidently declared that all that remained was for her to win and end everything, telling them to leave it to her. At that moment, Zyke called out to her when Lika asked what he wanted. She suddenly blushed as he stepped close to her, asking if she felt alright or if anything seemed off. Letting out a small sigh, Lika said she was fine and fully prepared as always, gently pushing him away and pointing out that he was standing too close. She assured him not to worry, promising she wouldn't lose. Logic then cheered her on, asking her to do her best. Zyke, however, remained silent as Lika walked toward the center of the arena. He couldn't help but wonder to himself what this strange feeling was, something unfamiliar stirring within him. Because his teammate had lost to Riald, Alan was furious. Without hesitation, he kicked the defeated fighter and coldly called him a useless pawn. As the man slammed against the wall, Alan added that he was worthless. Still, Alan declared that as long as he won his upcoming fight against Lika, everything would return to how it should be. Suddenly, Lika cut in with a confident smile. She told Alan that what he wanted would never happen, because she would be the one to win their battle. Pulling her sword from where it was embedded in the ground, she prepared herself, and at that moment Mentric officially announced the start of the match between West Hall and East Hall, Alan versus Lika. In an instant, Lika vanished from where she stood and launched her attack. As she charged toward Alan, he immediately noticed her incredible speed while defending against her strike. A bead of sweat ran down his cheek as he realized that this was the lightning aura user Lika, the one said to surpass even Sandy in power. After deflecting her attack, Alan quickly moved behind her as Lika landed. Alan leapt back, creating distance, but Lika did not stop. She continued her assault, once again using her lightning aura to strike. Alan began to think that in terms of raw strength, he might actually lose this fight. Fortunately for him, Lord Vanille had already taken action before the match even began. Whatever ability Vanille had used on Lika now took effect. Lika was visibly shocked, questioning what had just happened, while the audience quickly noticed that her lightning aura had completely vanished. Seeing this, Vanille gave Alan a signal to attack. Without hesitation, Alan charged forward, declaring that Lika couldn't beat him, absolutely not even without her aura. Lika used her physical strength to block Alan's attack with her sword. However, Alan suddenly kicked her in the stomach, forcing her back. Her allies grew increasingly worried as they watched. Eric clenched his teeth in frustration, while Zyke remained silent, holding her stomach. Lika kept asking herself why she couldn't use her lightning aura. Alan repeated that she would never defeat him, then unleashed a barrage of attacks across her body. Unable to use her aura, Lika had no choice but to endure each blow. It was explained that a warrior's body is deeply connected to the source power within them, and every movement is enhanced by that power. If a warrior loses their source power mid-battle, every attack from their opponent can become a fatal blow. Alan struck at Lika's head once more. Despite one of her eyes closing from the damage, Lika remained determined to win. She told herself that she only needed to defend against Alan's attacks until her source power and lightning aura returned. Sandy and Edgis grew more alarmed. Sandy said something was wrong. Lika was acting strange. Edgis agreed and wondered if her source power had stopped functioning, questioning how that could have happened. Meanwhile, after enduring Alan's relentless assault, Lika suddenly dropped to her knees in the middle of the arena. She coughed and struggled to breathe. Even Alan was surprised that she could withstand so much without her source power, as expected of someone on par with Lord Vanille, as a candidate for the next head. When Alan glanced toward Vanille, he saw him smiling grimly as he gave a clear order to kill Lika. Alan's expression darkened. He admitted that Lika had held out for quite some time, but this was as far as she would go. Logic no longer contained his worry and shouted, pleading for the match to be stopped. As he tried to rush toward Laika, however, Rield blocked him, stating that he could not interfere. Zyke, who had remained silent until now, suddenly darkened in expression. His eyes glowed with anger and his fists ignited with aura as he saw Alan preparing his next attack. Laika, sitting helplessly in the center of the arena, was filled with fear. She could barely move her body as Alan closed in. Just then, a golden bolt of lightning flashed across the arena. In an instant, Sandy appeared in front of Laika, sword in hand, shouting at Alan and demanding to know what he was about to do. Alan was momentarily stunned and halted his attack. Zyke let out a quiet sigh of relief, realizing he no longer needed to intervene. He knew that if he stepped in, East Hall would be disqualified, handing victory to West Hall. Alan questioned Sandy, asking why she was interfering. Sandy angrily replied that Alan should not pretend innocence. He had clearly tried to kill Laika, and she demanded that he confirm it. The audience fell silent in shock. Alan smirked and accused Sandy of being overly violent in her thinking, insisting that he would never do such a thing to a family head candidate. At that moment, Edgis stepped into the arena and questioned Alan as well. From his position, the last strike had looked far too dangerous. Alan grew irritated and asked if they were accusing him. Edgis calmly replied that if Alan disliked being accused, he should be more careful with his actions. He pointed out that anyone could see Laika could not use her source power, and attacking someone in that state with aura was unacceptable. Vanille then approached, calling out to Edgis and asking if he was interfering in the match just to complain about how they fought. He stated that in real combat, an opponent's condition doesn't matter. They simply crush the enemy completely. According to Vanille, West Hall fights as if every match is a real battle. Sandy, still furious, argued that even so there should be limits, that this was a match, not a death duel. Vanille mocked them, calling them soft, and saying that was exactly why they lose. Edgis remained silent, but Sandy's anger only grew. Vanille continued, saying they were not playing pretend war, they were fighting for real. He laughed, then added that while this was not a kill or be killed situation, they were still holding back, so it wasn't as if they were trying to kill Laika. However, with a grim expression, he admitted that something might have been a bit broken. Hearing this, Sandy reached her limit and released her lightning aura in anger. Before the situation could escalate, Mentric released his own aura, silencing everyone with overwhelming pressure. In a cold voice, he demanded to know when he had ever given permission for such pointless chatter. Despite this, Sandy insisted that Alan's earlier attack had clear killing intent. Mentric dismissed her, stating that someone who did not belong in the arena had no right to speak. He added that fools had no business disrupting the match, and whether the fight continued or ended was his decision alone. Edgis immediately apologized. Mentric then declared the match over. West Hall had won. He ordered everyone not involved in the next match to leave at once. Edgis quickly lifted Laika and told Sandy to pick up her sword before they left. As they exited the arena, Lykic and the others rushed to Laika's side, deeply worried. Edgis reassured them that she would be fine. He had already given her a healing potion, but she needed time to recover, so he would take her straight to the infirmary. Zyke remarked that Edgis might face consequences for what he and Sandy had done. Edgis simply smiled and told him not to worry, adding that he knew Zyke had also been ready to step in. Zyke jokingly denied it as Edgis carried Laika away. Sandy commented that something about all of this felt wrong. Alan was strong, yes, but for Laika to be overwhelmed like that was impossible. Edgis agreed, saying that something had already felt off since the very first match with Layla. There was definitely something going on with West Hall. While Laika remained unconscious, Edgis warned Zyke to be careful in his upcoming fight against Vanille. Zyke gave a slight nod, saying he appreciated the concern, as he walked toward the center of the arena. Vanille pointed his weapon at him, and declared that it was unfortunate Zyke would never be able to defeat him, and East Hall's loss was already guaranteed. Zyke ignored him completely. Instead, he casually stretched right in front of him. Vanille fell silent, veins bulging on his face in irritation. Mentric then announced the 7th match between East Hall and West Hall. The moment he gave the signal to begin, Zyke moved in an instant. He delivered a powerful punch straight to Vanille's jaw, causing him to spit blood. Zyke coldly remarked that Vanille's smug attitude really irritated him, and he wanted to see how long he could keep it up. The force of the blow sent Vanille flying into the wall at the far end of the arena, triggering a massive explosion. The audience was left in complete shock, their jaws dropping while even Mentric widened his eyes in disbelief at what he had just witnessed. Zyke then added that for someone who talked so much about real combat, Vanille had left himself completely open, and asked if this was the kind of real combat he liked before receiving a devastating attack from Zyke. Vanille first heard him ask and confirm whether those from the West Hall were truly fighting as if it were real combat. Because of this, confusion was clearly written across Vanille's face at the question, until Zyke stated that he would also fight Vanille in real combat mode and asked if he was sure he wouldn't regret it. Vanille then questioned what Zyke meant and arrogantly replied that Zyke would be the one to regret this battle, while silently wondering to himself what Zyke was talking about. Zyke then spoke again, and as he clenched his fists, his eyes faintly glowed while his expression darkened. Suddenly, Alan shouted, "Lord Vanille!" with both shock and concern. Although Zyke launched a powerful attack toward Vanille, the latter still managed to counter with a strong move of his own. A fast-moving sphere of wind rushing toward Zyke, however. Before it could hit, Zyke simply tilted his head slightly, effortlessly dodging the attack as it crashed into the arena wall. When Vanille stood up, he cursed under his breath, despite clearly feeling the impact of Zyke's strike. He couldn't understand how Zyke was still standing in the center of the arena. Vanille knew he had countered as quickly as possible when Zyke attacked him, so how was it that Zyke remained completely unharmed? Zyke then remarked that he now understood Vanille possessed wind-type source power and asked if he was from one of the four great families. He also questioned whether that was the special source power of Vanille's clan. Vanille, still furious, simply called Zyke a bastard in response. Zyke mocked him, asking how real combat felt, adding that he had even tried to match Vanille's style a bit for his sake. This only fueled Vanille's anger further as he demanded an explanation. He suddenly froze. Zyke had already moved behind him in an instant. Glancing back slightly, Zyke's eyes glowed again as he calmly said, "That's the second time." He then struck Vanille at the back of the neck, sending him flying across the arena as Vanille skidded to a halt. He questioned what kind of absurdity this was, how someone like him was being handled so easily by Zyke. When Vanille stood once more, Zyke immediately closed the distance again as he prepared another attack. Zyke remarked that thinking in the middle of a real fight wouldn't help, and asked if Vanille had always felt safe until now. Then Zyke delivered another powerful punch straight to Vanille's chest. The impact shook his entire body. His eyes turned white as he coughed up blood, collapsing to his knees in front of Zyke. "That makes 3 times, Zyke said. Trembling from pain, Vanille demanded to know what Zyke was talking about, what exactly he was counting. Zyke simply replied that it was obvious he was counting how many times Vanille had already died in this battle. Vanille, still confused, listened as Zyke explained. The first was when he struck his face, the second was the blow to his neck, and the third was the attack to his heart. Zyke added that the only reason Vanille was still alive was because of the rules. Enraged, Vanille shouted that there was no way that was true, but Zyke kicked him in the face mid-sentence, declaring that Vanille was right. This was real combat and break time was over. Talking to your enemy wasn't part of it. The force of the kick sent Vanille rolling across the arena. Sandy's expression darkened as she watched, unable to believe what she was seeing. Sweat trickled down her face as she said that the battle between Zyke and Vanille could no longer be called a fight. Edgus agreed, adding that compared to this, his own match with Zyke felt like nothing more than a friendly spar. He went on to say that Zyke's strength was unreasonable, that he was the very definition of unfair. Standing in the middle of the arena with a faint smile, Zyke asked Vanille if he was starting to understand what real combat truly was. As Vanille lay trembling on the ground, struggling from his injuries, Zyke acknowledged that crushing the enemy completely was indeed important on a battlefield, just as Vanille had said. He added that Vanille and the others from West Hall would likely become excellent warriors in the future. As Vanille tried to crawl toward him, Zyke briefly closed his eyes and pointed out that they were not on a battlefield. Their match was under the supervision of instructors with healing potions readily available. He described it as a very soft environment for someone like Vanille to be talking about real combat. Vanille, still struggling, told Zyke to shut up, but Zyke continued, saying that the real combat Vanille spoke of was far removed from reality, that he was merely running away from his own weakness. He then asked if he was wrong. Instead of answering, Vanille shouted repeatedly for Zyke to be silent, his anger reaching its peak. Suddenly, a green whirlwind formed behind him, leaving the spectators stunned. Vanille declared that someone like Zyke, a bastard child, had no right to lecture him. Zyke calmly asked if Vanille was going through a rebellious phase, saying that if that were the case, nothing he said would get through anyway. He added that as Vanille's opponent, it was fine for him to release all his frustration. Vanille, preparing his attack, told Zyke to shut up and stop acting like he knew everything. He then unleashed his wind-rending fan art Stormblade, sending a barrage of wind attacks at Zyke. Zyke easily leapt into the air, dodging every strike while airborne. Vanille thought to himself that he only needed one chance, just a moment to touch Zyke elsewhere. Lyjik, unable to understand what was happening, asked why the ground was tearing apart when he couldn't see anything. Edgus explained that it was Vanille's power, the wind aura of the Thanold family, one of the 4 great houses. He added that wind aura was invisible, so it was natural that Lyjik couldn't see it. Sandy, still irritated, called it a nasty power that suited Vanille perfectly. Edgus laughed and told her not to say things like that, though he admitted that regardless of whether it was annoying, it was difficult to deal with Vanille's continuous invisible attacks made him a tough opponent. Hearing this, Lyjik grew even more worried. Meanwhile, in the arena, Vanille was baffled. None of his attacks were hitting Zyke even though Zyke couldn't see them. Zyke simply replied that he only needed to follow the flow of the air. Vanille couldn't believe it, calling it nonsense. Suddenly, Zyke struck Vanille on the head and pointed out that his defense was wide open again. Clutching his head, Vanille declared he had truly had enough of Zyke. He launched a rapid series of attacks, but Zyke avoided them effortlessly, hands behind his back and eyes closed, as if playing around. After being cursed at again, Zyke remarked that Vanille really was in a rebellious phase. When Vanille finally stopped attacking, Zyke asked if he felt better, but Vanille only grew more furious, threatening to kill him. Zyke responded that Vanille's stubborn will was admirable in a warrior. As he delivered another blow, he added that Vanille's body had long since reached its limit. Vanille dropped to his knees once more. Zyke suggested ending the match, saying continuing would only cause more suffering. But suddenly, a mysterious purple aura emerged as Vanille grabbed Zyke's leg. Zyke didn't notice anything unusual at first, and asked if he still wanted to continue as the purple aura intensified. Vanille's face darkened, and he began laughing like a demon. When Zyke questioned what was happening, Vanille gathered his aura into his weapon and declared that this would be Zyke's end. He unleashed Gale Bullet from his wind-rending fan arts. Zyke tried to use his source power to defend, but something felt off. He couldn't use it. With no choice, he blocked the attack using only his physical strength. Lyjik and Eric were shocked that Vanille had landed a successful hit. Edgus noticed something strange about Zyke and pointed it out. When Celine asked what he meant, Lika and Marin arrived. Lika, being helped to sit, apologized for worrying them. When asked if she knew what was happening to Zyke, she explained that rather than knowing, she realized he was the same as her during her earlier match. She had suddenly been unable to use her source power. She added that Layla, who fought Vanille first, had acted strangely too. Perhaps she experienced the same thing. If that was true, then Zyke likely couldn't use his source power either. Back in the arena, Vanille laughed, convinced of his victory. He mocked Zyke for his earlier arrogance and declared he would ensure Zyke would never stand against him again. Gathering his power, he prepared his ultimate technique, Typhoon. Falling to dust as Zyke stood back up, Vanille ordered him to die and launched his attack. Lyjik could only shout Zyke's name in worry. Zyke, however, focused all his physical strength into his fist. Before the attack could hit, he rushed forward and delivered a powerful punch straight to Vanille's face. The impact sent Vanille crashing into the arena wall. As the dust settled, Vanille looked at Zyke with fear and disbelief, sweat dripping down his face. He couldn't understand how Zyke could still fight after everything. His companions were equally stunned, while Lyka simply laughed softly, remarking that it didn't seem to matter to Zyke whether he could use his source power or not. Vanille could hardly believe it. Even after unleashing his mysterious power, Zyke still managed to stand despite taking the full brunt of his attack. He couldn't stop himself from wondering how was that even possible. Meanwhile, as Zyke rose to his feet, he noticed a strange purple energy flowing both inside and around his body. It didn't take him long to confirm what it was poison. Because of this, Vanille grew even more furious and confused. How did Zyke figure it out? According to him, that poison shouldn't have been detectable at all. Then, without warning, Zyke spoke. He remarked that Vanille had finally scored a passing mark and said that he now understood why everyone who fought against Vanille and Alan ended up losing so one-sidedly. Zyke added that he had figured out the poison only activates when source power is stirred. He admitted that it had even slipped past him until the moment he used his own source power. Still, he acknowledged that Vanille had done quite well in creating such a poison. Vanille declared that his poison had completely sealed Zyke's source power and demanded to know how he withstood his last attack. But Zyke responded proudly, saying that something like Vanille's poison was meaningless against a thoroughly trained body. Even if his source power was sealed, it was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. He added that someone like him, the strongest, would never be shaken by such a thing. Hearing his poison dismissed so easily only fueled Vanille's anger. With a furious voice, he asked if Zyke was saying that his creation, his true killing poison, was meaningless. Zyke tilted his head slightly and asked if Vanille had made it himself. He observed that the poison seemed harmless to its creator, noting how Vanille could channel it into his opponent using source power without suffering any side effects. Zyke admitted that it was a groundbreaking kind of poison and that creating something like it was truly impressive. But then he raised his voice and declared that it simply didn't work on him. Taking a deep breath, Zyke forcefully expelled all the poison from his body through his nose. Vanille's eyes widened in shock. Sweat began to form on his face as he watched in disbelief. Zyke had detoxified himself and even expelled the poison through his nostrils. Zyke calmly explained that while the poison was indeed unique and interesting, that was as far as it went. In the end, everything came down to his own strength. If Vanille relied entirely on his poison, then he still had a long way to go. Vanille froze for a moment, stunned by those words before asking what Zyke meant. But instead of answering directly, Zyke simply asked if Vanille was satisfied now. That question only made Vanille grit his teeth harder. Memories began flooding his mind, memories of the harsh world he grew up in. He recalled his mother's cold words telling him that no matter what, he had to become the next head of the Eldragon family, and if he couldn't, then he had no reason to exist. He remembered the constant praise surrounding Lady Lyca, who had already mastered the family's secret technique. Everyone spoke of the candidates for the next family head as geniuses, everyone except him. Vanille knew it himself. He was ordinary. No matter how hard he tried, it only exposed how little talent he truly had. He could accept that his older siblings were stronger, but he could never accept that even Lyca, who was younger than him, surpassed him so completely. He remembered his mother's harsh lectures, shouting at him, asking how he could fail at something so simple. Those endless days of scolding carved deep scars into his mind. But in the midst of that suffering, he had finally discovered his own talent, poison creation. When he succeeded in creating this poison, he believed he had finally found his path with it. He could become the next family head with it. His mother would finally acknowledge him, and yet now, Zyke had effortlessly detoxified it and called it meaningless. Enraged, Vanille shouted, asking what Zyke could possibly know about him. He spoke of how he was constantly compared to geniuses, no matter how hard he worked. In front of their overwhelming talent, he was nothing, and still the comparisons never stopped. That was why, no matter what, he had to struggle and claw his way upward. As he launched another attack, Vanille declared that someone like Zyke, who knew nothing about him, had no right to judge him. Zyke raised his left arm to block the attack and used his right hand to grab Vanille's arm, but suddenly Vanille flipped his weapon and unleashed all of his poison at once, covering Zyke in a dense, toxic mist. Zyke's companions grew anxious while Edgus silently observed. Sandy, unable to hold back, asked what Zyke was planning to do inside the cloud of poison. Vanille spoke. He admitted that Zyke was right. He would rely on his poison as long as he won, nothing else mattered. He knew he lacked talent in combat, but when it came to poison, he had confidence. As long as he had it, he wouldn't lose. In truth, he hadn't wanted to use this technique, but he had no choice. He explained that even he, as the creator, could barely detoxify this deadly cloud of poison needles by using it. Now, he was forced to inhale some of it himself, but he was certain after going this far, his victory was guaranteed. Then suddenly, Zyke grabbed his hand again. Vanille's eyes widened in horror as he saw Zyke catch the poison needles with his mouth, clenching them between his teeth. Zyke calmly asked if this was his final trump card. Vanille couldn't believe what he was seeing as Zyke spat out the needles. Vanille collapsed to the ground in front of him, his face darkened, his eyes trembling as he watched Zyke's hands slowly move closer. But instead of attacking, Zyke placed his hands on Vanille's shoulders and spoke seriously, telling him to listen carefully. Kneeling in front of him, Zyke said that Vanille had one big misunderstanding. When Vanille asked what he meant, Zyke explained that becoming strong didn't require talent in martial arts, nor did it require special ability with source power. All that mattered was the desire to win every single fight, that he said was the first thing Vanille needed to learn because it was the path that would lead him to true strength. Then Zyke suddenly shouted, telling him that his claim of having no talent for martial arts was complete nonsense. The real problem was that he was using the wrong weapon. He suggested that Vanille should use something with a longer handle, and then casually added that an umbrella would suit him quite well. Vanille blinked in shock, asking if he was serious. Zyke simply replied that it was no joke. It might sound unusual, but, like his iron fan, it was a weapon with a long history. With a small smile, he added that almost anything in this world could be turned into a weapon. Vanille fell silent, wondering if there really was a weapon suited for him. Then Zyke placed a hand on his head and said that despite what he thought on the battlefield, he was more of a warrior than anyone else. That statement left him speechless. Zyke continued, saying that in real combat, Vanille's mindset wasn't wrong. As long as he won, anything was acceptable. But if he clung too tightly to pride, he would never be able to protect anything. To win and to protect what mattered, he had to use every tool at his disposal. His thinking wasn't wrong, he was simply using it in the wrong place. Zyke then stood up and held out his hand, asking Vanille to come with him. Vanille stared at him in confusion as Zyke said that if he followed him, he would make him as strong as he ever wanted to be. When Vanille asked if he could truly become like him, Zyke confirmed it without hesitation, even pointing out that he was already far stronger. He added that once his training began, Vanille wouldn't have time to complain about talent anymore because he would train him relentlessly until he became strong. Vanille stood there in shock, thinking that Zyke spoke boldly, but as he reflected on those words and remembered his desire to grow stronger and earn his mother's acknowledgement, he slowly reached out his hand to accept Zyke's offer. But just before their hands could meet, Zyke suddenly delivered a swift uppercut, saying that he had almost forgotten they were still in the middle of a match. Vanille couldn't believe it. After everything Zyke had said, he still attacked him. But Zyke simply stated that a match was a match. Once Vanille woke up, he should come find him. As Vanille fell unconscious, the poison within his body was expelled. Mentric immediately declared the match over, though even he couldn't believe that Zyke had managed to detoxify everything with just a single punch. He then announced that this concluded the selection matches, and that the East Hall was the ultimate champion of the selection. The participants from the different halls of the Dragon's Nest returned as the defeated, carrying with them the weight of their losses. Meanwhile, as night fell, Zyke and his group gathered together and held a small feast to celebrate their victory. Before the celebration could even begin, after the selection matches had just concluded, no one could help but glance at Zyke. At the same time, questions began to surface. Wasn't it East Hall that had won the selection matches? Then why were they, along with students from other halls, summoned to attend the celebration as well? Edgus simply laughed and admitted that he didn't know the reason either. As everyone continued to look towards Zyke, he calmly said that he assumed Mentric would explain everything to them tonight. Meanwhile, Zyke kept eating the food laid out in front of them, completely unfazed. He soon noticed that his companions, as well as the students from the other halls of Dragon's Nest, had yet to start eating. With his mouth still full, he asked what was wrong and why no one was touching the food, even pointing out that it would all get cold if they didn't start soon. Laika, however, suddenly spoke up, saying she couldn't understand how Zyke could eat so calmly at a time like this, and asked if he wasn't even curious about what they were about to be told. Zyke simply continued eating, prompting Laika to let out a helpless sigh. Just then, the door opened and Mentric entered, apologizing for making the students wait. He told them to begin eating, only to notice that Zyke was already devouring the food beside him, so he casually added that everyone else should eat well too. As the meal went on, Mentric explained that the feast was also meant to reward them for participating in the selection matches. Soon after, he called for everyone's attention and announced that he would begin explaining the special mission. Edgus raised his hand and asked if they were even allowed to hear about it, to which Mentric replied that there was no problem. Edgus himself might end up participating. This left Edgus confused. Mentric then revealed that a few days ago, a special rift had been discovered on the Eldragon family's grounds. The announcement shocked everyone, including Zyke, who recalled reading about rifts in books before. Mentric continued, saying that while everyone likely knew a bit about rifts, special rifts were different. Simply put, they could not be cleared by normal means. Laika asked what he meant, and Mentric explained that this particular rift would only allow 7 people to enter, and all of them had to be 3-star level or lower. Anyone 4-star or above or exceeding the set number would be forcibly pushed out if the conditions weren't met. Entry was impossible. Not even the family head could enter. Therefore, any attempt had to strictly follow these rules. He added that although the Eldragon family did have some 3-star soldiers, rifts had been appearing more frequently lately, leaving them short-handed. That was why the students had been chosen. He also revealed that the special rift most likely contained magic water, something necessary to awaken magic power. At the mention of magic water, the students were visibly shaken. Zyke immediately said he had read about it before, and Mentric confirmed that he was correct. By consuming magic water, one could gain the ability to convert source power into magic power, which was essential to becoming a magician. Hearing this, Zyke's eyes lit up as thoughts of magic filled his mind. Mentric went on to explain that the world was ruled by 8 great houses, including theirs, the Eldragon family, collectively known as the 8 Gates of Dominion. However, while the other houses all possessed magic springs that naturally produced magic water, the Eldragon family had none. That was why this mission was critical. They had to clear the special rift and retrieve the magic water. Failure was not an option. Mentric's expression then turned serious as he added that the rift had appeared near the border of another of the 8 Gates of Dominion, the territory of the Kerberos family. It was almost certain that they would be targeting the rift as well. With that in mind, the selection matches had been held to identify capable 3-star and below individuals from Dragon's Nest. Edgus and Sandy exchanged glances, and Edgus pointed out that the 7 members of East Hall who had won would likely be the ones sent to clear the rift. Sandy smiled, seeing this mission as a major step toward helping Laika get closer to becoming the next family head. However, Mentric clarified that although East Hall had won, it didn't automatically mean all 7 of them would form the strike team. Even so, Edgus remained hopeful, while Sandy thought about how she could support Laika. Mentric then stood up and struck the table, declaring that from this point forward, under East Hall's leadership, they would form the strike team, regardless of wins or losses. The purpose of the matches had been to observe everyone's strengths and fighting styles as a basis for team formation. Glancing at Vanille, he remarked that some individuals hadn't been able to fully display their abilities. Then, turning to Zyke, who was still eating, Mentric declared that Zyke would choose the members of the strike team. This shocked Zyke, who immediately questioned why he had to make the decision. The room fell silent as Mentric asked why he found it surprising. As East Hall's representative, it was only natural that he would lead and choose the team. However, Zyke said that wasn't what he intended, and after glancing at Laika, he suddenly came up with an idea. With a grin, he suggested that Laika should choose the members instead. This startled Laika, who questioned why it had to be her. Zyke simply asked if he would be part of the mission, to which Laika replied that it was obvious he would be. She then asked if he was really okay with her making the decisions and leading the team. Zyke responded that whether it was okay or not didn't matter. If he were the one to choose, he'd just make himself the only member. This shocked Laika, who immediately pointed out that knowing him, he'd probably enter the rift alone if it were possible. As Laika began thinking about who to choose, Zyke added that if she aimed to become the next family head, this was a perfect opportunity to train her judgment. He then asked Mentric if he minded letting Laika take the role instead. Mentric said he didn't mind, and asked if Zyke was sure, reminding him that leading this mission would bring him one step closer to becoming the family head. But with the expression of someone far older than his years, Zyke said he had no interest in that position. This stunned everyone, including Vanille. Edgus quickly asked if he was serious. Sandy echoed the question, and Laika herself sought confirmation. Zyke calmly replied that it wasn't a big deal to him. It all depended on what he personally valued. Edgus insisted that becoming family head would mean having everything the Eldragon family possessed, but Zyke firmly stated that he didn't need any of it. There was only one thing he wanted: the end of the martial path. His words left everyone in stunned silence. Zyke then reassured Laika not to worry about him and told her to focus on choosing her team. Accepting his words, Laika stood and began selecting the members of the strike team. Meanwhile, within the Kerberos family, the family head questioned whether the report he had received was true. His subordinate confirmed that a special rift had indeed appeared in the Great Abundant Forest. When asked if the lizards had already begun moving, a term he used to refer to Ballas, the head of the Eldragon family, the subordinate broke into a cold sweat. A heavy pressure filled the room as the Kerberos family head demanded to know why he was only being informed now. The subordinate immediately apologized, explaining that the Eldragon family had deliberately misled them, causing the delay. After hearing this, the family head remarked that he had heard of such tactics before, and noted how unusually active the Eldragon family had been in the forest. It all made sense now. He called them crafty pests. The subordinate added that there was a high chance the rift contained magic water. Hearing this, the family head said that in that case, the Eldragon family would stop at nothing to secure it. He then asked about the conditions for entering the rift, and was told that it required 7 individuals, all at 3-star level or below. The family head noted that while the condition wasn't particularly difficult, the Eldragon family had still beaten them to it, and likely filled all available slots. However, the subordinate revealed that the L-Dragon family didn't have enough soldiers to spare, and were instead sending trainees. The family head confirmed this, and questioned whether they were truly planning to clear a special rift with inexperienced youths. When assured that the information was accurate, he was asked what their next move should be. Whether they should quickly assemble a team, the family head replied that even if they did, they would already be too late. However, if the L-Dragon family was indeed sending trainees, then Balas's heir would undoubtedly be among them. When the subordinate asked what he meant, the family head instead asked how many deception bracelets they had left. The subordinate answered that they had 4 remaining. Upon hearing this, the family head issued his command: use all the deception bracelets if necessary, so long as they could eliminate Balas's children. The subordinate hesitated, pointing out that they didn't know when they would obtain more, but the family head dismissed the concern, saying that if they hoarded them, they would only gather dust. It was better to use them now where they would truly matter. With a cruel smile, he added that he wondered what kind of expression that lizard bastard would make when his child was killed, and that it would be quite entertaining to witness Balas L-Dragon's reaction. Zyke shifts his focus toward the companions he is about to leave behind, making it clear through his demeanor that they will not be spared from hardship. In his view, their current strength is far from sufficient, and improvement is not optional but necessary. Without hesitation, he throws them into an unforgiving training routine. The first exercise immediately sets the tone, as they are forced to perform push-ups while bearing the crushing weight of enormous boulders pressing down on their backs. The strain is overwhelming, yet Zyke offers no relief. The intensity escalates as Lyjik and the others are driven into endurance training that borders on merciless. They are made to run at full speed while dragging massive stones behind them, their bodies pushed to their limits with every step. Rick and Marin observe the ordeal with visible dread, questioning whether such punishment is truly required. Their unease is met with a deceptively innocent expression from Zyke, whose almost playful look contrasts sharply with the brutality of the exercises. Understanding the futility of resistance, the group forces uneasy smiles and accepts the situation. They recognize that arguing would only make matters worse when Zyke has assumed the role of instructor. Satisfied with their compliance, Zyke acknowledges them with a subtle nod before moving on to the next stage of training. His attention turns to Raymond, the blonde shield user. Zyke introduces a new and intimidating tool, massive enchanted stones known as regeneration stones. These objects, prepared in advance, immediately confuse the group. Their purpose is not obvious at first glance. Zyke explains that these stones possess a dangerous characteristic. Any force applied to them is reflected back with amplified intensity, multiplied many times over. The explanation is accompanied by the memory of his own painful experience with such stones, reinforcing the seriousness of the situation. Despite the obvious risk, Zyke expresses confidence in his approach. He declares his intention to strike one of the stones using nothing but physical strength, deliberately avoiding the use of source power. The announcement leaves his companions stunned. The idea appears reckless to the point of absurdity. Nonetheless, Zyke prepares himself with calm focus and delivers a clean, unenhanced punch to the stone. The observers are left in disbelief, unable to comprehend how he could attempt such a thing without protection. Zyke remains composed, fully aware that the returning force will be devastating. As expected, the stone releases an explosive surge of energy that rebounds toward him. The sheer magnitude of the impact suggests certain injury, yet Zyke had anticipated this. Instead of absorbing the full force directly, he employs a basic shield to intercept the shockwave. The shield cracks under the strain, but it successfully demonstrates his point. This method, though risky, serves as a clear example for Raymond. The lesson focuses on mastering defensive techniques, either by enduring the impact head-on or redirecting it effectively. Raymond, realizing the difficulty of such training, feels a deep sense of pressure. Next, Zyke directs his attention to Celine. He hands her a sword and instructs her to attack the regeneration stone using her source power. She complies with determination, unleashing a rapid sequence of strikes. However, her attacks lack precision, landing across multiple points rather than concentrating on a single target. As a result, the stone recovers almost instantly, negating her efforts. Zyke identifies the flaw immediately. Her strength is scattered rather than focused, allowing the stone's regenerative ability to outpace her attacks. He clarifies that her training will revolve around refining her focus, channeling all her energy into one precise point. To illustrate this principle, he demonstrates the technique himself. With a single fluid motion, he delivers one perfectly concentrated strike. The impact penetrates the stone's core, causing cracks to spread across its entire surface. The display leaves Celine astonished. The precision and power achieved in a single blow surpass anything she had imagined. Zyke explains that her current style prioritizes rapid, numerous attacks, but advancing further requires a shift in mindset. Each strike must carry intention and accuracy rather than relying on volume. Celine accepts this guidance with gratitude, understanding the path she must now follow. Zyke then turns to Logic, who braces himself for another grueling challenge. Contrary to expectations, Zyke presents him with something unexpectedly simple, a delicate white feather. Despite its simplicity, the task proves far from easy. A swirling green aura of wind energy begins to form around the feather, immediately capturing Logic's attention. The energy resembles a technique associated with a powerful figure, one that Logic recognizes instantly. Zyke reveals that he learned to replicate this ability after experiencing it firsthand in battle. The explanation defies logic, leaving Logic unable to comprehend how such a feat is possible. Ignoring the disbelief, Zyke proceeds to outline the objective. Logic must learn to control the flow of wind with such precision that he can manipulate the feather without physical contact. To demonstrate, Zyke performs a seemingly impossible act. He balances the feather using controlled bursts of wind generated through his movements, maintaining its position with extraordinary accuracy. The challenge lies in the feather's lightness, which makes it extremely sensitive to even the slightest disturbance. Zyke explains that true mastery requires a shift in approach. Instead of attempting to dominate or control the wind forcefully, Logic must learn to align himself with its natural flow. Through another demonstration, Zyke shows how subtle movements can create gentle currents capable of lifting and guiding the feather. The lesson emphasizes surrender rather than control, suggesting that true command over the element comes from understanding and harmony. Logic struggles to grasp the concept, yet the depth of the technique leaves a strong impression on him. As the training session concludes, Zyke's composure reflects the confidence of someone who has already reached a higher level of mastery. His companions are left overwhelmed, each facing a daunting path of growth. Before they can fully process the experience, a voice calls out to Zyke, urging him to hurry. The reminder pulls him back to the present moment. With a brief farewell, Zyke entrusts his friends with their respective training tasks and departs to join the mission team. Logic, shaken by the challenge ahead, begins to doubt his ability to succeed. However, support from his companions helps him regain his determination. The emotional weight of the moment transforms his uncertainty into resolve. Meanwhile, preparations for the mission are underway. A group of selected individuals gathers, forming an unconventional team composed of both allies and rivals. The lineup reflects a strategic decision, combining different strengths to maximize their chances of success. Despite underlying tensions, the team moves forward with a shared objective. Elsewhere, discussions unfold regarding the mission's risks. Concerns arise about potential interference from rival forces, as well as the possibility of betrayal once the objective is achieved. Confidence in the team's abilities remains strong, particularly due to Zyke's presence. Observers note that his capabilities defy conventional evaluation, making him an unpredictable yet invaluable asset. Speculation about his origins intensifies as his abilities are compared to legendary techniques reserved for the highest authority within his lineage. The similarities are too significant to ignore, raising questions about how he could possess such knowledge without formal training. Investigations into his past reveal no clear explanation, deepening the mystery. The idea emerges that Zyke's talent may transcend ordinary understanding. Some consider the possibility that his abilities are tied to something far older and more profound. This theory, though difficult to accept, gains weight as more evidence aligns with it. The notion of reincarnation is quietly suggested, linking him to figures of immense historical significance such as El Dragon. The revelation leaves a lasting impact on those who hear it. What initially seemed impossible begins to feel plausible in the face of Zyke's extraordinary feats. His presence alone challenges established beliefs about strength, talent, and legacy. The head observed everyone's reaction and noticed their growing nervousness, then dismissed the situation by calling it an absurd story. He reasoned that if the kid truly possessed that level of power, then wild dogs like those would be insignificant to him. The scene then transitioned smoothly to 1 week later, where all the instructors and students had gathered in a jungle. Freyna appeared visibly worried as she asked about the whereabouts of the vice leader of the Black Dragon Squadron. An instructor hesitantly explained that when they realized the situation, the vice leader had already disappeared. The word disappeared lingered heavily in the air. Freyna reacted with concern, recalling that they had promised to send more personnel, yet she remained unsure whether he would be safe. Her attention shifted as she noticed that others had just arrived. At that moment, Lika approached, with Zyke following behind her. Lika energetically spoke about running and moving along at the fastest pace, questioning how one could expend energy before the mission and why Instructor Freyna was present there. Freyna responded coldly, clarifying that she was no longer acting as their instructor, but was instead on a mission for the protection of the special domain. Lika realized they were dealing with a special domain, prompting Freyna to explain that certain cracks could influence the outside world and create such domains, and that this was one of those cases. As Zyke listened, he observed the dark trees and felt a familiar energy, similar to the black mist that had emanated from the raging boar he had previously fought. He reflected that he had never considered that phenomenon to be an effect of a crack. Zyke questioned why Freyna was protecting the special domain. Freyna explained that her purpose was to contain and sabotage the Cerberus family. When Lika asked what sabotage meant, Freyna elaborated that conquering the rift and obtaining the magic water would undoubtedly strengthen the Eldragon family, something their rivals would not welcome. Lika acknowledged this explanation, and Freyna added that they also eliminated monsters expelled from the special domain, among other duties. Zyke showed curiosity about the term expelled, prompting Freyna to clarify that the entry limit for the special rift was restricted to 7 3-star individuals. Edge confirmed that he had heard the same. Freyna then demonstrated by placing her hand on the domain barrier, explaining that those who did not meet the requirements, including herself, were expelled. She further clarified that monsters of 4 stars or higher were also excluded. Only those meeting the criteria could enter, and entry operated on a strict first-come, first-served basis. Once participants entered, no one else could join until the rift was conquered or completely cleared. Zyke placed his hand on the domain with ease, surprising Freyna internally. He analyzed the barrier as something that selected participants. Although it was said to be indestructible by force, the more he heard, the more he felt tempted to test it. His smirk made Freyna uneasy, prompting her to remind him to listen carefully when others spoke. Zyke responded playfully, assuring her that he had been listening, though Freyna immediately called out his lie. Freyna then warned that they did not know when members of the Cerberus family might arrive, so they needed to proceed quickly. Turning to the students, she asked if they were ready. The group responded with determination that they were prepared. Freyna wished them good luck in conquering the domain. The group entered the domain and soon encountered a herd of massive deer with enormous antlers charging toward them. Venel stepped forward prepared to strike and swiftly killed them all in a single attack. His companion praised his performance as magnificent. While Venel quietly stared at his weapon, this moment triggered Edge's memory of an earlier encounter. He recalled secretly watching Zyke hand Venel a weapon. Zyke had instructed him to take it, reminding him that he always followed through on his promises, including training him since the mission would involve real combat. Zyke insisted that Venel use the staff. Venel questioned the decision, pointing out the importance of the mission and his lack of familiarity with the weapon. Zyke insisted anyway. Frustrated, Venel threw the weapon aside and refused, questioning why he should use something he did not understand. As Venel walked away, Zyke used the weapon's aura from behind, releasing a powerful wind energy that shocked Venel. Venel questioned why Zyke was using wind energy. Zyke dismissed the concern and again urged him to use the weapon. Venel initially refused, repeatedly saying no, while Zyke persistently insisted like a stubborn child. The exchange escalated until Venel, exhausted, collapsed and finally accepted the weapon, admitting there was no reasoning with Zyke. Zyke then explained that although there was no umbrella available, the cane served as a substitute with similar handling to a Lin Paralog. He declared that this time, Venel would train specifically for that style. Venel expressed doubt, pointing out his lack of basic knowledge or technique. Zyke reassured him, claiming he had created a technique tailored specifically for him and revealed its name. The scene shifted back to the present, where Venel reflected on the technique known as the Phantom Wind Umbrella technique. He found it hard to believe that Zyke could create a technique from scratch, yet he recognized that since adopting it, his movements had become sharper and perfectly aligned with his wind attribute. Edge observed this and wondered if Zyke had truly created a personalized technique. Zyke praised Venel's last strike, while Venel's companion confirmed that the technique had indeed been created by Zyke. She whispered in amazement, questioning who Zyke really was. Venel, still frustrated, admitted he did not know. Meanwhile, Lyra approached Zyke with a smile and asked him directly whether he had created the technique. Zyke proudly confirmed that he had. Lyra reacted with surprise and excitement, clapping happily. Sandy, however, dismissed the claim as impossible. Edge countered that, considering Zyke, it somehow made sense. Sandy insisted that regardless of what others believed, she would not tolerate being obstructed, directing her frustration toward Venel and his companion. Venel reacted angrily, demanding clarification. Sandy arrogantly criticized him, claiming he could not fight properly without relying on poison, and was now using a technique he did not understand. Venel and his companion snapped back, demanding respect and warning her about her language. Sandy retaliated, accusing them of being upset by the truth and belittling them further. Lika attempted to calm her, urging her not to get so angry. Edge stepped in with a laugh, trying to diffuse the tension by reminding everyone that they were partners in conquering the special rift and needed to cooperate. Sandy strongly objected, questioning how she could cooperate with those who had nearly killed Lika using poison. She declared her disagreement with the team selection. Edge and Lika tried to restrain her. Zyke then asked Lyra if she had any thoughts on the matter. Lyra responded indifferently, stating she did not care as long as she could participate in the mission. Zyke found her attitude amusing and praised her broad-mindedness. Sandy, still upset, questioned Lika's decision to include such individuals. Lika explained that although she was not as pragmatic as Lyra, she recognized the outstanding skills of those individuals and believed they were necessary for the mission. Venel's companion sarcastically remarked that at least the leader seemed sensible, unlike her older cousin. This provoked Sandy further, causing her to lash out again, only to be restrained by Edge, who tried to keep the mood light. Amid the tension, Lika expressed concern about whether the group would truly be able to function effectively. Zyke reflected internally that the aftermath of the selection test was still affecting them, preventing trust and cooperation. He noted that each member had their own unresolved thoughts, making the group unstable. He considered that if they could understand and accept each other, they might become trustworthy companions. Lika then drew everyone's attention to the crack ahead. Zyke reacted with excitement upon seeing an actual crack in space. Lika shifted into leadership mode, warning the group that they did not know what awaited them inside and urged everyone to remain focused. The group steadied themselves with determination. Zyke stretched his arms and encouraged everyone to proceed. At that moment, he sensed someone entering the domain from behind and briefly looked back. When Lyra asked if something was wrong, Zyke dismissed it and urged the group to move forward immediately. With that, everyone focused their attention on the crack and prepared to enter together.